Julian, the Empire's mad tyrant, a sociopath feared as the demon of the Northern Front, the laughing executioner, merciless, cunning, and cruel beyond belief, a monster who bows to no one, not king, not god. But in the body of this villain lives someone else. A player who cursed the game, now forced to rewrite it with his own hands. Can he change fate while wearing the mask of terror? Let's find out. Somewhere in the mountain desert, a hero sat on his knees before a villain. Julian approached him, dragging a bloody sword behind him, and said that even he, whom everyone called a hero, had fallen. If he had thought about his own safety and stayed in his magnificent mansion, such a tragedy would not have happened. He wiped the blood from his sword and added that now he was nothing more than a fallen star. Hayden Reich looked at him with hatred and asked how he could do such a thing to him. He replied that he should have treated him better while he was supporting him as a hero. Hayden raised his hand to his chest and asked in disbelief if he could really kill him, his master, so mercilessly. Julian thought for a second, then laughed and raised his sword above him, telling him that he would do it with ease. And so, Hayden was killed by the villain. Seeing this end to the story, Li Shihu clutched his head. He grabbed the monitor and screamed that this couldn't be happening. He couldn't believe that such a useless Hayden had died. He had just watched the trailer for the DLC for the game, Let's Kill the Demon King. It was strange that the developers had spoiled such an important part of the plot, because Hayden Reich is a very significant character. He was a hero of the Northern Front, leading people even in the most desperate situations. He was a brilliant demon hunter and a legend, which in itself is the embodiment of nobility. The most important thing is that he is the main character of this game. How could the main character die like that? Especially at the hands of a villain who betrayed his own master, at the hands of Julian. This was the question that was currently tormenting Shihu. He was so furious that he was ready to break his monitor and started blaming the developers for everything. He had really high hopes for this DLC, and they had ruined everything. He has the first rank in the game, and he spent a total of 38 million won and 100,000 hours of his time on it. After looking at the comments for this trailer, he was very surprised. Most players were happy that this season the game's main character was the villain, Julian. He was very angry because, in his opinion, this was not cool at all, and he was just a traitor. And so he decided to write his opinion in the comments. He wrote that he couldn't understand why this idiot was equated with the main character, and he would cancel the pre-order right now. He kept his word and canceled the pre-order in one click, after which he threw away all the game merch and finally said that they had a good time together, but that was it. After that, he lay down on his bed and started cursing at this stupid game, but he couldn't just throw it out of his life. He even felt a little sad, because other games don't have such good graphics and a vast world. It protected his heart, exhausted by reality after starting his first job. This game was his corner of peace. Now, he only has his favorite plant left. He took the flower pot and hugged it tightly, thinking that caring for it saved him from sadness. Afterwards, he sprayed the leaves and said that now he understood why old people like to grow orchids. I hope it doesn't repeat the fate of that game and grows well. While he was carefully tending his plant, a notification sounded and he turned to the computer. He received a message from the game developer. He asked, "He's been playing this game for 5 years, right?" He looked at the monitor incredulously and wondered if this was an automated message, but he still decided to reply to the developer and wrote that he really had been playing this game for 5 years. The developer said that they saw that he canceled the pre-order for the new DLC. He didn't like the further development of the story. He stared at the monitor in bewilderment and wondered, what's going on? They don't want to refund his money? He saw that they were writing to him again, and then he received some kind of link. As soon as he clicked on it, the monitor lit up brightly, blinding him, and for some reason a wind picked up in the room. At first, he froze in shock, and when his head started to be sucked into the monitor, he tried to get out and realized that he needed to turn off the computer right away. He reached for the power button, pressed it several times, but the computer didn't respond, and he panicked, after which a loud scream was heard. He was completely sucked in, and the monitor finally went dark. Meanwhile, he found himself in some unknown space along with his favorite flower. He felt like he was falling somewhere, and then he saw a wasteland below. He fell to the ground and was now wearing completely different clothes. Having moved after such a hard landing, he raised his head and quickly looked around. He found himself right at the site of Hayden and Julian's last battle. As soon as he stood up, he ran into a huge scorpion, and when it attacked him, he miraculously dodged it, then broke into a run with a piercing scream. He turned to the scorpion for a moment and thought that if it hit him, there would be no trace of him left. The scorpion quickly caught up with him. He covered his face with his hand and was already afraid that he would die, but when he felt no pain, he looked at the monster. For some reason, it didn't hit him. He abruptly ducked. Only then did the scorpion attack, and he, gritting his teeth, sent it all to hell and punched the monster with all his might. When it fell limply to the ground, he sighed with relief and thought, did he succeed? What even happened now? Had his body always been this light? He remembered the system window with a description of his character's traits, and the developer's offer to change the course of the story himself, and wondered if he had really become a character in this game. As the scorpion attacked him again, he ran away with a loud scream. When the monster pounced on him, he turned around excitedly and drew his sword, thinking he didn't understand what was happening at all. But luckily, the character he had become was Hayden Reich. He had played this character for several thousand hours. Gathering all his strength in his hands, he swung the sword down, causing a bright blue flash and dealing a powerful blow to the monster, which immediately killed it. He looked at the insect's body with a smile and caught his breath, thinking that this was to be expected from Hayden's strength. Thanks to this, he would be able to change history and prevent Julian from killing him. The system reported that he had mastered the basic swordsmanship strike, the crescent. This confused him, because Hayden had no such moves, and a thought occurred to him that greatly alarmed him. He removed his hood, picked up his sword, and looked at his reflection in the blade, causing his eyes to immediately widen in surprise. After that, the system reported his character's appearance. Silver hair, narrow eyes, and an impassive face. He is an outstanding swordsman, the vessel of the Demon King, possessing impeccable mana control and incredible instincts, and his name is Julian Criffart Plassen. Realizing that he was the story's villain, he grabbed his head and cursed, and the system reported that Julian always treats everyone with respect, causing his cry to immediately become polite. Time passed, he returned to the palace and looked in the mirror. Walking hypocrisy, a hotbed of betrayal, that perfectly describes Julian. A character with such a sly look truly looks evil. He never imagined he would become like this. He parted his eyelids and wondered why he couldn't open his eyes wider, and he still couldn't come to terms with the fact that he would now have to live in his body. A whole week had already passed. He was trying to return to reality, smashing everything around him and asking the system to send him back. He shook the status window and searched for any information, but all in vain. He did not succeed. However, because of his formal speech trait, he is forced to speak only politely, even to himself, which irritates him very much. But he liked something about his new appearance. His face was now quite cute. Now he understood why this character is popular. He approached the mirror and wondered if his head-to-body ratio was 1:8 or 9. Meanwhile, Harand was heading towards his room, and he was very nervous, because knowing what Julian really was, he now felt like he was voluntarily walking to his execution. He knocked on the door, entered the room, and greeted Julian. He looked at him and thought that this was a blood relative of the Criffart family. What did he want? The poor man shuddered in fear at his gaze, but trying not to show it, he asked how he was. MC thanked him and told him that everything was fine, and the man smiled nervously, saying that he was glad to hear it. He was very worried when he learned that their incomparable Julian had lost consciousness. He laughed nervously, after which an awkward silence reigned in the room, and MC thought, what did he need? None other than Harand had personally shown up to see him. How would Julian behave in such a situation? Harand, meanwhile, thought he was so creepy. Not even a muscle on his face moved. Even though he had come to see him personally, he was a difficult guy. Maybe he should try to shake him up. He said that he had recently heard a rumor that he had lost his memory. MC smiled nervously and, remembering how he had behaved the last few days, thought that's why everyone was whispering when they saw him, but he really does seem suspicious. Noticing that he was lost in thought, Harand frowned and wondered if he was at a loss. He said it was just gossip, so he shouldn't worry. But suddenly Julian called out to him with a grin, causing him to flinch. He then asked if he believed it himself. Harand shuddered at his question, and almost fell over in fear. He realized that he wasn't at all at a loss, and said excitedly that he didn't believe it. He looked at his smile, those eyes. It was impossible to tell what he was planning. Perhaps Julian had already guessed that he had come on the orders of the Noble Elders Association. He pulled himself together, and told him not to take the gossip the maids were spreading too seriously. By the way, he didn't come here only because he learned of his condition. The Elders Association asked him to convey a message. MC knew what kind of association this was. It was created by aristocrats. They always placed great importance on lineage. Direct descendants would not stand idly by if a member of a branch family attempted to seize power. Julian came from a branch family, considering himself a lackey of the ruling house, and his outstanding swordsmanship and magical abilities posed such a threat to this organization that they wanted to get rid of him. So, he had to be careful. He asked what they had said, and Harand told him that he needed to participate in the Shut-Eyes entrance test as an inspector. Shut-Eyes are people who secretly carry out tasks for the palace and usually work as court guards. It is a unique organization whose members possess incredible combat abilities. Julian is also a member of Shut-Eyes, but it is highly suspicious that people who look down on him would nominate him, and so MC wondered if he should even do what they were asking. Noticing how he was lost in thought, Harand grinned and thought that he usually didn't fall for the association's tricks and didn't listen to them. So how could he convince him? But to his surprise, he didn't even have to do anything. MC agreed to come as an inspector, which greatly shocked the guy. He worried that he had health problems, and he, pulling the bandage from his head, confidently said that nothing hurt anymore. Harand was terrified. He was so nervous that he started sweating, but he didn't know that Julian was nervous himself. He told him to get ready and leave the room, after which he quickly headed for the door and thought that if he lingered here, he didn't even know what Julian could do. First, he needed to create a distance, but when Julian asked him to wait, he froze in fear and thought, is he not going to let him go? He had already turned around, about to beg him for mercy, and MC, seeing how scared he was, handed him an orchid and said that he just wanted to give it to him. It would help him calm down. After that, he left the room with this orchid. His legs buckled from fear and he fell, starting to breathe heavily. He had already forgotten that they called him the Laughing Executioner. MC, meanwhile, glanced around the room, littered with orchids, and sighed heavily, noticing that he had finally put one away. His room was furnished with orchids because they heard him mindlessly mention them in a dream. Now he needed to give it all away. Since they were waiting for him, he decided to quickly get ready and took the sword, thinking that Julian was not so stupid as to go outside unarmed. And when he opened the closet, he saw very bright outfits with eye-catching prints inside, and thought in horror, is he crazy? This style of clothing is just awful. But since he had to act like Julian, he threw on the most normal cloak from his collection, after which he told Herand that he was ready. He shuddered in fear, and MC left the room, saying that they needed to go. He was already looking forward to the interview. Where will it be? After that, they set off on a carriage, and Herand told him that the entrance exam to Shut Eyes will be held at the training grounds of the VL Academy. Julian thought that this place was not important in the game, but he remembered it. He said out loud that he was interested in what kind of academy this was, and the guy raised an eyebrow in confusion, saying that he had been there before. He studied there. MC quickly corrected his mistake and said that a lot of time had passed, so he was sure the academy had changed. Herand didn't ask any unnecessary questions and sighed with relief, thinking that Julian had attended this academy, so he hoped there weren't any old acquaintances left. Soon they arrived at the academy. A huge, beautiful building appeared before them, and MC noted with a smile that in reality the academy was just as huge as in the game. Herand didn't understand what he was talking about, and he laughed, saying it didn't matter. The guy felt uneasy and smiled, rubbing his palms, thinking that the stunning graphics of the game were nothing compared to reality. Herand, meanwhile, glanced at him nervously and thought that he was too creepy. Judging by his face, he was planning something. Julian immediately turned to him and wondered if he was too afraid. He even felt awkward. He called out to him, causing him to flinch once again, and said with a smirk that he could go now. He was grateful to him for accompanying him, but contrary to his expectations, he wanted to stay to watch how the exam went. This made MC have doubts. He looked at him suspiciously and thought that he was dying to leave as soon as possible. And what is this ominous aura that has appeared above him recently? A dark aura emanated from his entire body. It is not mana or power. So, this is his emotion? Is this really how fear is expressed? He opened the system window and learned that his character has the negative color trait of a unique rank. He can sense negative emotions towards himself, and also distinguish emotions by the color of the aura. Now Julian understood everything. He pointed to the system window, which appeared right in front of Herand, and he asked in confusion why he was pointing his finger at him. It must have been weird, the creepy guy pointing at you and still saying nothing. MC, meanwhile, remembered that his character in the game was always good at picking up on other people's emotions, and he was especially skilled at using the emotion that every person experiences, fear. He could win a fight without even starting it. He also used anger to make his opponent lose their mind and make more mistakes. It seemed like it was all about that trait. In that case, the reason Herand didn't leave despite the fear, but stayed with him, is because the elders probably asked him to keep an eye on him. It seems they consider him a thorn in their side. But he can understand them. Julian is an infamous character after all, so he's sure the elders want to get rid of him. Now that word has spread that he's lost his memories, they'll rush to take advantage of the opportunity. Of course, he won't let them. He needs to survive and return to the real world. While he was thinking about this, a student bumped into him and, rubbing his bruised head, he apologized to him. But when he saw Julian's sinister grin, he screamed in fear and fell to the ground, asking, "So it was him?" MC immediately understood what would follow after that scream. All the students around trembled in horror. They didn't understand why the ruling family's crazy henchman was here. The guy who bumped into him was finished. Herand became very worried and asked Julian to calm down, because he was just a kid, while Julian frowned and pursed his lips, mentally exclaiming that he hadn't done anything yet. He nervously clenched his fist and realized that it was understandable, because he also hated Julian. He looked at the people around him and felt fear everywhere, and between it, anger. He closed his eyes and thought, why couldn't Julian be a little nicer? It was bad that he attracted so much attention. He needed to calm the students down somehow. A girl emerged from the crowd, not at all afraid of him. She greeted him, and he looked at her in surprise, wondering if this was Eileen Donatian, one of the game's main characters and an instructor at the VL Academy. She's connected to the magical tower of the Adritan Empire and is a brilliant mage who controls the element of metal. At 24, she possesses the fifth circle. She gave Hayden a ton of advice during the Academy's story arc. But why did she greet him? Do they even know each other? He rubbed his neck in confusion and was about to think she would lighten the mood, but he saw negativity radiating from her, and that was bad. Was it fear? Maybe anger? No, it was hostility, and she skillfully hid it behind a smile. But why? What had Julian done anyway? She was an advanced mage, and he couldn't let her find him suspicious, so he needed to figure out how to resolve the situation, and quickly. He smirked as he called her a halfling and asked who gave her permission to address him that way. Her aura immediately changed color, and her smile vanished. A tense atmosphere settled between them, and he mentally clutched his head, noticing that she had simply lost the power of speech. The problem was that he was Julian now, so it didn't ease the tension at all, and was even unnecessary. But he decided to play his villain role to the fullest and drew his sword, asking if Halfling's hearing was half as bad as normal. Seeing this, the poor boy became frightened, and Eileen became wary, after which he ominously asked, "Do they know what sounds a person makes when dying?" Seeing how she tensed up, he began to gloat, thinking, is she scared now? Maybe she finally calmed down. But she did not act at all as he expected. In response to his actions, she activated magic and said that even though he was from Shut Eyes, he should not behave like that in front of the students and the instructor. This was clearly violence against the academy, so she cannot let him get away with it. Hearing this, he became nervous. He clearly did not expect such a development of events, and she ordered him to prepare himself, because she is a difficult opponent. He became nervous and thought that he was going to retreat as soon as he scared her with his villainy. After that, the girl attacked him and created a bright flash between her hands, and then struck him with a piece of metal. He immediately rushed to block it, but upon impact, his sword jerked downwards, and he, looking at the scattered fragments, thought, are they really going to fight? Eileen, meanwhile, turned to the students and ordered them to run away quickly, and they, looking at Julian in fear, hurried away. Herand ran along with them. He had no idea what was happening here at all, and thought it would have been better if he had left when Julian suggested it. He meanwhile laughed, attracting the girl's attention, and pounced on her, saying that she shouldn't have been distracted in the middle of a fight. She immediately put up a protective barrier in front of herself, but since she couldn't react in time, he smashed it into pieces and approached her, causing her face to flush. With a loud cry, she stretched out her hands and fired a stream of magic at him, which he dodged and was forced to increase the distance between them. He noticed that the blow was fearful, as if she had invested emotion into it. Meanwhile, she caught her breath and thought that she hadn't meant to hit to kill, but he still dodged every blow, but that was to be expected from him. She once considered him the ideal aristocrat. In the past, when she was just a student at the academy, she and the girls stared at him because he looked much more charming than other aristocrats. Eileen blushed at the mere sight of him. She really liked him and thought he was cool. He was well connected, and thanks to his skill with the sword, he was considered a rising star of the empire. And when she looked at him, she hoped that her origin from a branch family wouldn't hinder her. He was someone she looked up to. She truly believed that he would change society's prejudices about branch families. At that time, she didn't differentiate between respect and love for him, so she confessed to him and was rejected. And now, remembering all this, she decided to take revenge on him for that refusal, and furiously gathered a huge clot of magic, making him nervous. When she fired again, he dodged and he thought it was close. But why did she blush? Was she really that angry? She furiously ordered him to finally take the blow, and he, deciding to finish, slipped behind her, which she clearly didn't expect, and then lightly hit her on the head with the hilt, and with a smile suggested that she stop this game. His actions made her embarrassed again, after which she turned to him and exclaimed, "What is he doing? Does he despise her? Why didn't he use his moonsword when she was open? If he wanted, he would have definitely killed her." She felt that he had enough mana, so why didn't he do it? He smirked and asked, "Does she really want to know?" She blushed again, and thought that he would hardly admit her feelings after so long, and asked him to tell her the reason. He pointed to Herand, who was chuckling nervously behind his back, and said that he was here for the first time, so he could not take him to the testing site, and the others were too scared. This left her speechless, and he, again calling her a halfling, asked her to take him to the testing site. She became very angry. She did not expect that this was the whole reason. After that, she went with them to the testing site, and while they were walking, MC thought about the moon sword. Usually, when you cover a sword with an aura, it seems to illuminate it. But Julian's sword is a little special. It changes color on its own, and therefore it seems as if it contains moonlight. With this sword, Julian defeated countless demons. Seeing this, people called the sword the Moon Sword out of a feeling of respect and fear. Now it is his symbol and the source of his power. So how can he know how to harness it? It's bad that Eileen has already begun to suspect. He needs to make sure no one finds out about this. He clenched his hand into a fist with a grin, and the two of them sighed, wondering what he was up to again. Noticing that they had stopped, he turned to them and asked what was going on, after which they continued on their way. They arrived at the training ground. MC opened the doors and walked inside, telling the guys that they had been waiting for him for a long time, that he hoped they were all doing well. He was very sorry that he was late. Instructor Eileen distracted him. Hearing this, she clenched her teeth in anger, after which he introduced himself to them and said that today he would be in charge of conducting their entrance exam at Shut Eyes. He was sure they had all heard of him. While he was introducing himself, Herand quickly looked around, looking for someone. He noticed the second son of the Torso family nearby and was glad. He knew that he would come. The Torso family is famous for its long-standing friendship with Krifart. Friendships with Shut Eyes members are highly valued by society, as the organization is directly connected to the Imperial family. But this also means intense competition. The exam is a fight between an instructor and an applicant. If Julian dishonors the second son of Thorso by losing during the exam, the Elders Association will seize this opportunity to eliminate him. Then he will be disgraced. Meanwhile, MC asked, "Does everyone here want to join Shut Eyes?" They nervously confirmed this, and he chuckled, saying that he sees before him only a bunch of cowardly losers. They have the naive eyes of those who had a peaceful upbringing, and the ornamentation on their swords only amuses him. Shut Eyes, which they also desire, is the bloodiest place in the Empire. As the eldest, he will give them a chance to experience what it's like to be there. He announced the start of the entrance exam and drew his sword, saying that the criterion for passing was his death. Hearing this, the guys became very nervous. In fact, Julian was now in the same state. He smiled wryly and thought that the deed was done. In fact, he only recently learned that the entrance exam was held in the form of a duel. Haran told him about this, and he wants him to fight them. In the fight with Eileen, he could only run away. If he had to participate in an official duel, then everyone would simply realize that he was weak, and that all the talk about his strength was mere exaggeration. Everyone would understand that he really had lost his memories, and that would be the end of it. He glanced at Eileen, standing behind him, and thought that, moreover, if he seemed suspicious, then someone would definitely attack him. Since that was the case, it was best to continue mocking them. He raised his hand and exclaimed, "What's the matter? The exam will only end after his death, or when there are no more applicants left." The boys grew nervous. None of them dared engage him in combat, and then one of them raised his hand and said he surrendered. A bunch of more hands followed. Only Blondie didn't raise his hand, but was visibly nervous. Still, he succumbed to the influence of the others, and also raised his hand, saying he surrendered. Hearing this, Eileen and Harand were very surprised. MC himself was surprised that all the applicants surrendered at once. He chuckled quietly and covered his wide smile with his hand, then waved his cloak pompously, and sheathing his sword, headed for the exit of the training grounds and announced the end of the exam, since there were no applicants left. In his heart, he was very happy. This was to be expected from Julian. His depravity saved him. But what about Eileen? Did her fear of him really overcome her hatred for him? When he looked at her, he felt nothing, and she looked at him with a strange, regretful expression. This made him nervous and began to hit himself on the head, wondering if the color of negativity really didn't work. Could the line just suddenly disappear? Then it would be a problem. Eileen, meanwhile, pursed her lips. At that moment, he reminded her of Julian from the past, who also avoided unnecessary fights by intimidating his opponents. Now she didn't feel any negative emotions, which is why MC didn't see anything. After that, he headed to Shut Eyes, and Harand called out to him, saying that he did well. He frowned slightly, then put his hands on his shoulders, and he, immediately lit up with the color of fear, asked what was wrong. Convinced that the color of negativity worked, he smiled with relief and said that he had done the hardest work. After that, a guy named Lazret ran up to them. He was very excited to meet Julian and exclaimed with admiration that he was irresistible. He asked who he was, and Julian told him that he was in charge of administrative affairs at Shut Eyes. It was a great honor to meet him. After all, the rumors that he had lost his memory were false. He completed the exam without ever fighting any of the applicants. He continued to admire him, and MC mentally noted that his mouth simply could not close. After that, Lazret said that the second son of the Torso family was among the applicants. But even this did not make him spare them. This was to be expected from him. Hearing this, Harand became agitated. He pounced on the poor guy and pointed his finger at him, exclaiming in rage, how dare he laugh at the fact that he failed the exam. He raised his hands in an excited voice, explaining that he hadn't meant to laugh at him, but he didn't listen and asked how he could treat someone who was still studying like that. He knew the relationship between their families. MC called out to him and said that he had misunderstood. Or perhaps it was Torso's family that had misunderstood. He smirked and said with an evil expression that Shut Eyes didn't accept aristocrats. Since the organization was directly connected to the ruling family, they accepted commoners or members of fallen families. Harand exclaimed that he was an aristocrat himself, and he responded by saying that he was from a sideline of the Kryfart family, a half-breed, and therefore a lackey of the imperial family, not his own. Torso's second son had applied for the exam even though he knew he wouldn't be able to make it to the second round. Was his family trying to teach him wisdom through experience? Or was someone planning something to do with the entrance exam? As soon as he said this, Harand shuddered in fear and thought so he knew everything. He knew that the exam was a trap set by the elders and that he was connected to them. Julian smiled and said that, however, that simply couldn't be true. It was probably a simple misunderstanding. The man looked away and MC, smiling, looked at him, saying that if things turned out differently, it would be a great pity. Soon he returned to the palace. The maids greeted him and offered him dinner, but he refused and, remembering something, asked them not to let anyone into his office. As soon as he entered his room, he put the sword on the table and sat down, sighing with relief. Judging by Heron's reaction, it seemed the Elders Association really had plans for the entrance exam. It was lucky that no one discovered him today. But how long will he have to behave like this? At some point, the elders will really notice his flaw and kick him out of the family. He glanced at his sword, actually still worried that he hadn't been able to use it. The ability to use it grants power capable of overpowering others. He picked up the moon sword and decided to try unlocking its power. He drew it from its sheath and glanced at the blade, engulfed in a blue aura, but it dissipated after a second. He frowned in displeasure and thought that this was expected. It wouldn't activate that easily. Julian's trait, Exceptional Swordsman, allows him to easily learn swordsmanship, and as soon as he picked up the sword, the path he must follow became clear to him. The system showed him a more detailed description of this trait. He had been accustomed to weapons since birth to follow the path of a swordsman, and he can master any sword-shaped object, regardless of its type. But all this wasn't enough. There were countless people in the Empire who were just as good as him when it came to swordsmanship. There were dozens, if not thousands, of characters alone. However, their difference from Julian is obvious. They have a huge difference in skill when it comes to using aura and mana. That's why he managed to survive despite his unusual way of thinking. But now he doubts he'll succeed. If the mana flow reverses, it can destroy the organs, so controlling it is very dangerous. He became nervous, but still decided to do it, because sooner or later, he will need to prove his skills. If the principles of mana work in the game and in this world are similar, then he, who has played thousands of hours, knows what to do. He needs to move the mana accumulated in his heart through the vessels inside his body. And among the 38 vessels, there are 6 main ones, of which the main one is a large vessel in the head. It is connected to the heart. He tried activating this zone, and feeling something, his eyes widened in surprise. He looked at his hand and realized that the aura was fluctuating, after which he looked at his sword. Now he needed to transfer the mana from his body to the blade, but when he tried, the resistance was stronger than he expected. But he was confident he could handle it. All the glow transferred to the sword. It sparkled with a blue light, and he was glad he had succeeded. But when the glow weakened, he began to doubt it. He glanced at it with a smile and noticed that the sword had materialized, but it was still too weak. But what was that? A crescent moon? At least the moon had come on the first day. After that, he went to the training grounds and stood in front of 3 dummies. Taking a fighting stance, he quickly drew his sword from its sheath and immediately slashed at the dummies, breaking them into many small pieces. Putting the sword away, he sighed with relief and mentally noted that he had reached the level of a knight. Now he just had to complete his moon sword. But his knowledge of the game isn't enough. He needs someone who knows his character, someone he can ask for advice from. His thoughts were interrupted by a maid who approached him and told him he had a guest. He was glad he had guests and thought it was his friend, but it turned out to be just Lazret. As soon as he saw him, he was immediately disappointed and called him by name, which made the guy very happy, but then immediately became worried. He asked. He didn't remember his name because of his behavior yesterday. Did he? MC thought. How can he forget someone who talked so much in front of him? He didn't know if he was stupid or fearless. He answered that it wasn't like that at all and asked what brought him here. He was delighted and told him he had received an order from the commander. He needed to clarify with him the results of the entrance exam that had taken place yesterday. He asked in confusion, didn't he see how the exam ended? He nervously scratched the back of his head and answered him that receiving the results from the examiner himself and presenting them was part of the procedure. He thought it was such useless nonsense. This organization was irrational. He headed back to the palace and asked him to tell him that no one passed the exam, and he said that he understood everything. He would immediately pass this on to the commander. But before he left, something came to his mind and he asked him to wait. He said that he would report this to the commander. He confirmed this and he smirked, saying that he would tell him about it himself. Hearing this, Lazret was very surprised and worried, and Julian said that they would go there right away. He would give him a ride. Hearing this, the guy became very nervous. He began to sweat from fear and asked if he had really done something wrong. Probably, it was all because of yesterday. He said that this was not the case at all, after which he removed his hand from his shoulder in disappointment. In fact, he just thought that it would be uncomfortable for him to go alone, so he showed attention, but he was so scared. Julian should have been kinder. Well, since that's the case, should he ask him for advice? Commander shut eyes. He's sure he knows Julian well. He'll make it so that the Criffart family won't be able to plan anything where Shut Eyes is. He needs to try this. After that, they went to the office together, and the guy burst into the commander's office exclaiming that they had a problem. Julian Criffart Plason came here in person. The commander looked at him and asked, did he come here himself? MC, meanwhile, arrived at the Adreton Imperial Palace and was very happy because he was finally seeing this place in real life. The continent of Rosenda, the main setting of the game, is ruled by 3 powerful states. Among them, the strongest is the one in which Julian lives, the Adreton Empire. After the Demon King Barbatos was sealed, the shattered countries united under the strong hand of the monarch and became a single, powerful nation. Nothing could better prove one's power than this beautiful palace. His player heart simply fluttered. Meanwhile, Razrat, seeing his smirk, became extremely nervous and realized that he was afraid. Normally, Julian wouldn't have gone personally, but would simply send a servant. So why was he suddenly heading to Commander Shut Eyes with him? Why did he have to deal with all this? The townspeople they passed began to whisper when they saw Julian. They were surprised that he came here in person, because according to rumors he was injured, and now he looked quite fine. They all realized that his memory loss was just rumors, and Razrat, looking at his smiling face again, wondered what was wrong with him. Although it was a great honor, he felt like he was about to fall somewhere. MC smiled and remarked that the scenery here was beautiful, and he looked at him in surprise, agreeing with him. He said that the commander could probably be found near the second gate of Kyonya. This is the first gate of Gyeongcheon. It is open to everyone. The guy was very confused and thought, why is he saying this? Everyone already knows about it. Having guessed something, he became worried and thought, is this really a test? His mocking expression says it all. Does he really think that someone with his level still needs to take tests? If he doesn't like how he leads it, then he's definitely finished. While he was clutching his head, MC was admiring the palace. He wasn't thinking about any tests at all. Noticing that he was clutching his head, he asked if everything was okay, and he excitedly exclaimed that he was fine. There is nothing more important than good health for a member of Shut Eyes. Finally, they arrived at the palace, and Razrat fearfully asked, did he pass? MC didn't understand what he was talking about, and he nervously asked, wasn't this a test? He responded with a puzzled expression and denied it, then asked why he needed to test him. Hearing this, the guy shuddered and smiled with tears in his eyes, thinking, does this mean that he recognized him as a member of Shut Eyes? He bowed low to him and thanked him, and then hurried away, humming something joyfully. MC only looked after him in bewilderment and thought, who is this strange man? A man approached him. He said that according to Commander Odwin's order, he can enter. He adjusted his clothes and smiled at the thought that they would finally meet. Commander Odwin Balladeer, the only heir to the fallen Balladeer family. His strength and leadership qualities were enough to occupy the important position of commander, who, if not him, can control Shut Eyes, which answers only to the imperial family. He is now very interested in what he looks like in real life. While the guy walked him to the commander's office, he was a little worried. He stopped at the door and asked the commander for permission to enter, and a voice was heard from the other side. Having received permission, he found himself inside the office and saw a short girl with a very tired look in the commander's place, and she smiled slightly and told him to go inside. They hadn't seen each other for a long time. She heard he was wounded. Is he okay? Meanwhile, he was completely perplexed. Could this really be Odwin Balladeer, the commander of Shut Eyes? This is not how he imagined the commander. She is incredibly small, even very small. He remembers that in the description there was something about small stature, but not that much. And the commander is also a woman. Not that this is a problem, but she is very small. Noticing that he was thinking, she sharply pointed her finger at him and asked, was he going to say that she was as small as always? He flinched, then smiled nervously and told her that, of course that was not true. She again inquired about his injury and ordered him to report it. Hiding his hands behind his back, he clenched them nervously and wondered what he was even supposed to say. Everything would be more difficult with her. He had to watch his words. He glanced nervously at the guard standing at the ready, thinking that if he made a mistake, he would become suspicious. Even someone like Julian had to treat his commander with respect. Shut Eyes were described as the imperial family's watchdogs, following orders. He bowed slightly to the commander and thanked her for her concern. His injury was severe, but it was not enough to emphasize his devotion to the imperial family. She raised an eyebrow in confusion and looked up at him, which made him think he had done something wrong. She seemed lost in thought, then abruptly rose from her seat and walked over to him, remarking that this was all strange. Did he always talk like that? He became very nervous, and she touched his chin with the hilt of her sword, saying that something seemed unfamiliar to her about him. He immediately saw a negative tinge emanating from her. She suspected him. He mentally clutched his head and wondered how he had even talked to his boss this whole time. He grabbed her sword, deciding to start acting like a real villain, and through a smile he hissed discontentedly, "Is there a problem with that?" She frowned at him, grabbing her sword, then returned to her seat and said that he usually didn't come to the Shut Eyes office in person. Even if he did, he quickly finished his report and left. Suddenly, he became more conscientious about his work. Meanwhile, he mentally clutched his head. He had thought that Julian would take his responsibilities seriously, but he had underestimated him. He told her that he had taken a long break due to an injury. He had come to report about that, among other things. She asked incredulously, "So that's it?" He frowned with displeasure and asked if she had something against it. He decided to act brazenly and bluntly, like his character, and leaning on her desk, he asked discontentedly, "Am I not allowed to come here now?" She looked at him tiredly from under her brows, and mentally noted that he had only just returned, and was already becoming aggressive again. She said that she heard that he had some mental problems after the injury, but it seemed that he was completely fine. He thought nervously that it was good that she said so, but he had a strange feeling. The way she said it so bluntly in front of him, she was definitely an unusual person. She returned to the documents on her desk and told him to report whether there was anyone useful at the entrance test. He confidently answered her that there was no one, and she noted that this was predictable. To him, as a student of Haydenreich, the Holy Sword, their skills might seem laughable. However, perhaps there was at least someone capable enough to take him on as a trainee? He replied that there was no such person, and she, putting the documents aside, asked discontentedly, did this mean he hadn't chosen anyone at all? He confirmed this, and she asked why. He remained silent, and she repeated her question again, but with obvious discontent, and then jumped up from her seat and exclaimed in rage, had he really lost his mind? Shut Eyes was currently seriously short of people. They needed new personnel. Even one person would be useful. He replied that even if that were the case, they couldn't just take the first people they came across off the street. None of those candidates were suitable. She exclaimed that there had to be at least someone. If he had at least tested them, maybe someone would have proven useful. He replied that it was a waste of time. They weren't even fit to be trainees. In his mind, he nervously noted that in reality, he was simply avoiding battles. She sighed heavily and said that he was simply impossible, then waved her hand and ordered him to get out of her sight. But before he left, he said that he wanted to make one proposal. He was scared, but he needed to act like Julian, so he did it. He took a letter from his inside pocket and put it on her desk, saying that he had identified several problems with the admissions test. She unfolded the letter and asked what those problems were. He told her that people seemed to have a poor understanding of what Shut Eyes was. She looked up at him with interest and said that she thought they really needed to understand what kind of organization they were trying to join. Hoping that there was something more than just banal here, she returned her gaze to the letter and read it out loud. If someone applies to take the Shut Eyes entrance test, the organization is not responsible for any incidents that occur. She let out a loud chuckle and remarked that it sounded like he was going to fight them with killing intent. Did she understand correctly? He only laughed nervously in response, and she, thoughtfully tapping her finger on the letter, thought that judging by the fact that there was no response, she was right. But that was strange. Julian was second in Shut Eyes after her, and he had never been interested in such internal matters. She looked up at him and told him just not to tell her that this was why he didn't select anyone in the test. Was he afraid that someone would get hurt in the process, and he would have to take responsibility for it? He responded by spreading his arms wide and said that, besides, everyone who took such a test turned out to be useless. Didn't their organization report directly to the imperial family? They couldn't afford to tarnish their name. I don't want to hear this anymore. She raised her hand excitedly and exclaimed that she understood everything. When it comes to the imperial family, you just can't shut him up. She will forward this to the council right away, but she can't promise that it will be accepted. He thanked her and was about to leave, but she asked him to wait and said that she heard that he received a letter from the Imperial Secretariat and that he should come and check it. He turned to her with a smile and agreed, then left. As soon as she was alone, she glanced at his proposal and thought that Shut Eyes would not be held responsible for any incidents that occurred. This means that if someone dies during the test, there will be no problems. Of course, this will not change the essence of the entrance test. Besides, initially only commoners and nobles from fallen families could get into Shut Eyes. There was no power behind them, so there were never any problems. Julian knew this too, so the real purpose of his proposal was different. He probably found out that the Council of Elders and the Torso family interfered with the testing. So this is his way of countering this? He sees through all their plans, and if they try to do something like this again, he won't let them get away with it. That's what he says when he suggests making changes. Is it so impudent of him? He wants to harm the Council of Elders like this? There was a knock at the door and she asked who it was, after which her subordinate entered the office and asked if she had summoned him. She handed him a letter and asked him to deliver it to the council, after which she thought that he really had changed after that injury. Until now, he blindly followed the orders of the imperial family, which is why they called him their crazy henchman, the one who ignored everything that was not the will of the emperor. Now he was freed from the shackles and realized his own ego. She smiled faintly and thought that it was so tiring, but she would have to keep an eye on him. Meanwhile, MC approached the doors to his character's office and thought that he had finally made it here. Usually, Shut Eyes doesn't provide private offices, since they are unnecessary, but they made an exception for him. He was very curious about what this place would be like, and when he opened the doors, he saw strange things everywhere. From colorful outfits to twisted statues, there were luxurious things here that had nothing to do with work. It's even worse here than at Julian's house. Is he completely crazy? It all looks so expensive, but at the same time so ugly. He can't find anything he likes, he just has terrible taste. And now he has become this Julian. He tried to get to his workstation, but stepped on something and thought, if he doesn't even appreciate these things, why is he buying all this? Someone knocked on the door. He told the guests to come in, and Razrat appeared on the threshold, smiling and informing him that he had arrived to deliver a letter from the imperial family. He excitedly handed him the letter, and MC thought the commander had spoken about this. Razrat was about to leave, but he stopped him and said that he had arrived just in time. Let him load all these sculptures into the carriage. They shouldn't be very heavy. He was taken aback by such a request and asked if he needed to carry everything from here. He confirmed this, and the guy nervously pursed his lips. After which, he was very glad that he had given him another assignment. It was like a dream. He joyfully exclaimed that he would do it immediately, picked up a chest from the floor, and then carried it to the exit, but tripped over a statue and fell face down. There was a crash, and he and the chest fell to the floor, and Julian smiled awkwardly, thinking that he wouldn't have a single peaceful day. Trying to console him, he said that he was going to throw it away anyway, but Razrat didn't even hear him. He was already prepared for the death penalty for his misdeed. MC walked up to him and put his hand on his shoulder, telling him that he shouldn't do that. Since he was too scared, he decided to cheer him up with a joke and said that his death would only cause more trouble with cleaning, so let him keep working. Razrat almost burst into tears from fear and began to carry out his task, and he thought that his face scared him even more, but that was to be expected. While he was doing his business, he decided to read the letter and saw the crest of the imperial family. He had already noticed this in the game. He was glad that he could understand the local language and began to read. In short, it says here that if he's recovered, it's time for him to get back to work. It looks like they want to exploit him faster. They just softened the words. Well, nothing to complain about. Since he hasn't found any clues about the moon sword yet, it's important to gain as much experience as possible. His mission concerns the recovery of the resonance stone. In the game, let's kill the Demon King. There are monsters called demons, which is obvious. After the death of the Demon King Barbatos, his remnants either parasitized living beings or took physical form, which is how demons were created. And when they started attacking people, they began using objects to contain them. These objects are the resonance stones. This is the great legacy of mages, and it's amazing that they can create this using mana. Since he's not a mage, his task will be to accompany the mage who is working on these stones. He sees no reason to refuse, although there is a risk of encountering demons. If he successfully completes this mission, the rumors about him should die down. Now he wonders who he will have to accompany. Working with the resonance stone requires high skills in magic. He hopes it will be a good person. Meanwhile, Eileen arrived at the imperial palace. She stretched tiredly and, sorting through the scrolls, exclaimed discontentedly that she was a professor. So why should she still be doing this scribbling? One confirmation after another is needed. Perhaps this is the life of a magician. But the imperial family is too demanding. Someone touched her on the shoulder. She immediately turned around and saw her friend Diana. She waved to her and asked with a smile if she was in the palace on business. She happily noted that they had not seen each other for a long time, and Diana said that she was the youngest professor, but always busy. It was not easy to meet her. The girl laughed awkwardly and said that she was flattering, and she asked if she had time now. She was going to a tea party, and she wanted to go there with her. Eileen looked away and apologized to her, saying that she would love to go, but she was still busy writing articles. Diana told her that she understood. She was trying so hard. It reminded her of their student days. Nothing had changed at all. Noticing something, she pointed a finger behind her in surprise and asked, "Is that Julian's carriage?" Eileen immediately turned around and, seeing the emblem, thought that only the Criffart family could use such a carriage. So it was definitely him. Diana said that she heard he was dying. Had he really recovered already? He couldn't be that easy to finish off. Eileen frowned and agreed, and Diana, noticing her reaction, approached her with a smile and asked if she still had feelings for him. She blushed slightly, but decided not to show it, and pretended not to know what she was talking about, and her friend said with a smile that she was so innocent. She remembers when she heard rumors that if you confess your feelings under the blooming sakura behind the academy, you will not be rejected. So she invited Julian there. To prevent her from saying too much, Eileen abruptly approached her and grabbed her by the shoulders, suggesting that she quickly go to tea. Diana decided to mock her and asked if she wasn't busy. She laughed nervously and answered that she suddenly had some free time. Her friend asked her not to be so embarrassed. At that time, who didn't like him? Although, it seems she liked him more than anyone. Eileen became very embarrassed and nervously thanked her, after which she lowered her eyes and realized that she was right. The current Julian is the complete opposite of what he used to be. After returning from the northern front lines, he joined Shut Eyes, and that's when he became like this, changed. Diana offered to say hello to him, and she, with a heavy sigh, replied that that was in the past. Everything was different now. She wouldn't have to see him for a while. Diana asked what was going on, and she, using magic, produced a letter and told her with a smile that she had work outside the palace. She glanced at the seal in surprise and asked, "Is this a letter from the imperial family?" Eileen held a letter in the air and said she'd been assigned a mission. He looked at her and, smiling, said, "Restoring the resonance stone." After a while, one of the knights asked, "There are so many escorts. Is anyone important coming?" His companion confirmed it. Even the Blue Lion Knights and Shut Eyes were included. They said Sir Julian himself would be joining. He was surprised. What? He seemed to have lost his memory due to an injury, right? Those were definitely rumors from envious people. His companion said he thought so. He's one of those people who wouldn't even bleed if pierced. So what kind of injury is that? The protagonist, sitting on his horse, thought it was the right decision to take on this mission. Public opinion was moving in the direction he wanted. Then several knights rode up to him, one of them saying, "Sir Julian." They thank him for his service. He was Fern, a member of the Blue Lion Knights. The knight next to him said he was Heinrich. MC rode up to them and thanked the Blue Lion Knights for their work. He offered to ensure the mages reached Julian safely. Who knew what would happen along the way? He smiled wryly and thought, what if powerful demons appeared? He was even scared himself. The knights agreed with him. Then Fern said, "By the way, Sir Julian," he asked. "Yes?" Heinrich asked if he could ride in the carriage to Julian. Fern added, "Leave the Blue Lion Knight's escort and travel in comfort." He considered it. It sounded like a kind offer. However, was it really for Julian's comfort? The Blue Lion Knights are knights of the Imperial Regular Forces. Unlike Shut Eyes, most of their ranks are nobles. He figured they wouldn't want anyone from a branch family to steal the glory of the nobles. Usually in novels, when someone ends up in another world, they live happily ever after. But here, he, like the villain, was stuck in strange circumstances. Traveling by carriage was much more comfortable than on a horse. Heinrich thought, lucky to have sorted this out without incident. After that, the protagonist said that's what they would do. Heinrich smiled and said, "Of course. Then he'll give this to Lady Eileen when she arrives." The protagonist was surprised to whom. At that moment, she approached them and, waving her hand, said hello. What beautiful weather. She is Eileen Donaton. Today she is in charge of repairing the resonance stone. Then she closed her mouth in fear and screamed. Huh? The protagonist turned to Fern and, pointing his thumb at Eileen, said, "By the way, about him riding in the carriage. Maybe they'll forget about it?" He was surprised. What? At that moment, Eileen wondered in surprise. Why is Julian here? No, more importantly, was he avoiding her? The protagonist scratched his neck and thought, she's too unpredictable. It's uncomfortable when he doesn't know what she's thinking. At that moment, the knights wondered, what? Why did he suddenly change his mind? Was he really asserting his authority in this way? Then Fern gritted his teeth and thought, Julian. So he realized he wanted to send him to the rear to take command himself, as expected. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to survive in the chaotic imperial palace without the help of any factions. And yet, how dare some degenerate from a branch family act so arrogantly just because he received a little recognition from the imperial family? They'll see. MC noticed that no one said the mage they were supposed to accompany was Eileen. She got into the carriage and, adjusting the curtain, looked ahead, feeling very uncomfortable. The protagonist looked out the window and thought that he needed to finish the mission as soon as possible. Then there would be no more reason to cross paths with Eileen. After some time, he announced that they had arrived in Julian. He thought, so the resonance stone is here. It turns out it's a small place. Although they had traveled so long from the capital, no one had met them. Then a worker approached them and asked, "Are they from the capital?" The protagonist confirmed this. Holding a box in his hands, he said, "Welcome." He was grateful that they had come all this way here. He would lead them to the place where the resonance stone is. After some time, they arrived at the right place, and he said, "The box with resonance stones is here, and here's the box with mana stones." Eileen, pointing forward, said that she would take this one. She is sensitive to mana. The worker said, "Mistress Mage, does she want to see the place that needs repairing?" She agreed. After that, they approached the cracked stones. She looked at it and said, "My God, this will be difficult to simply fix. It might need a partial replacement." He looked surprised. Replacement? She rolled up the sleeves of her shirt and confirmed it. The barrier would disappear temporarily, but he shouldn't worry. It wouldn't take long. He said he believed her, and then she reached out to the stone and thought, the preparations are complete. Now she needs to tell Julian that the barrier won't be there for a while. She blushed with embarrassment and thought, even though she didn't even want to see his face, she should think of this as work. She's a professor. After that, she went outside and, approaching the protagonist, called out to him. Suddenly, he resolutely walked forward, and she said that she had to tell him. Huh? She reached out to him and thought, what? Is he running away? She shouted, "Hey, can he listen?" This is important. She thought he was ignoring her on purpose. Wasn't she imagining it? Why? It couldn't be. Did he know? Impossible. Then she grabbed his cape and thought, but still, this is too much. They are on an official mission, she must say. Then she asked why he continues to avoid her. He turned around in surprise and asked when he ever avoided her. She is the one who continues to persistently pursue him. She was indignant. What? She thought. What is wrong with him? It sounds so shameless that it seems true. Then she embarrassedly shouted that it does not matter now. He smiled awkwardly and asked, then what is important? Miss Stalker? She was indignant. Stalker? She tried to restrain herself, but this was too much. The next second, she screamed in fear. Demon. The aura around them seemed to change. The protagonist asked in surprise. Demon. She screamed. What was she saying? She pointed her finger at him and screamed. She was trying to say that the barrier will be removed. Demons may appear. Why did he have to run away from her? The next second, she screamed loudly as one of the knights flew to the side. The protagonist turned around and asked in fear, Sir Heinrich? He looked ahead and shouted, it's a two-horned demon. The protagonist looked at it and thought, not a hornless or one-horned demon, but a two-horned one. Unforeseen circumstances. Eileen ran up to him and shouted, what's going on? He told her to stay there. It's dangerous here. She looked at the monster in surprise and thought, a two-horned demon? Where did such a powerful demon come from? What should she do? None of the spells she knows are suitable for battle, and for now, she can't use the resonance stone. The next second, the demon screamed loudly and she looked away in fear. After that, the protagonist drew his sword, swinging it in front of him. He told her to concentrate, Miss Eileen. How she was shaking, terribly. He will deal with this. Everyone needs to mind their own business. She asked hesitantly, what's your business? He pointed his finger at her and said that she had a resonance stone on her and that his job was to protect her. Was she so scared that she forgot why she was there? She blushed with anger, and then, turning around, shouted for him to give her 7 minutes. The next second, she called him again, and he asked, what? She added, don't get hurt. She pointed her finger at him and said, she doesn't have healing magic. MC pointed his sword at the demon and said, it would be hard to get hurt. He thought about it, he said, but how scary. Never. He would never have thought that his first combat experience would be with a two-horned demon. Too many people were looking at him. He couldn't escape. If he escaped, there would only be more rumors, and even more suspicion would fall on him. If he were the real Julian, something like that. The next second, Fern stepped forward and said, stop. They, the Blue Lion Knights, will defeat this demon. Then he charged, striking the huge demon. He grinned and thought such a two-horned demon would be easy to deal with. And then he laughed and, looking at the protagonist, asked, was he scared of a two-horned demon? He didn't expect that from him, Sir Julian. The protagonist thought, right. Then the knight asked in surprise, was he laughing? MC thought that now he was Julian. In such a deadly situation, he was definitely having fun. After that, he used his feature, Exceptional Swordsman. The next second, he rushed to attack, dealing several slashing attacks at once. Fern, covering his face, shouted, Sir Julian, such damage from just one blow? Impossible. At that moment, the protagonist, holding a shining sword in his hands, smiled and thought, okay, it works. After that, he pushed off the ground, charged again, cutting off one of the demon's horns. The next second, he thought in surprise, this. The demon attacked him, sending him flying. He clutched his chest and thought, it hurt so much he couldn't breathe. He gritted his teeth and thought, if this is going well, even the smallest thing will show courage. So what's that? The next second, the demon's eyes lit up with renewed vigor, and it charged forward, shattering the ground. One of the knights, watching the scene, declared, impossible. Even Sir Julian had suffered. Fern laughed to himself and thought, no way one man can handle a two-horned demon. Well, is it his turn to take command now? Then one of the knights shouted, they must see. He turned around in surprise, seeing a silhouette in the rising smoke. The sword in the protagonist's hands was glowing. One of the knights shouted in surprise, is that a blue glow? The protagonist pointed his weapon forward and said, Moon Sword. The system reported, the unfinished Moon Sword has been activated. One of the knights shouted, this is the very Moon Sword he'd only heard about. The protagonist thought it wasn't even a quarter of a true Moon Sword, but surely it was enough for victory? With these thoughts in mind, he charged again, striking. Then the demon opened its mouth, screaming loudly. MC thought, clumsy movements, but powerful attacks. He sees it all. Nothing escapes Julian. It was time to use his ability. Then he used his insight trait. The demon's attacks aimed at him, but he easily began to dodge. The knights watched what was happening. One of them clenched his fists and shouted, he's dodging all attacks. Fern said in surprise, Julian from Shut Eyes. Meanwhile, Eileen, maintaining the magical symbols around the stone, said, it worked. Then she shouted, the barrier will appear again soon. At that moment, the protagonist noticed the demon's confusion and said that he had let his guard down. He had made a stupid choice. He grinned and charged again, delivering a slashing blow and moving forward. Eileen watched in surprise, as did the other knights. With this attack, MC easily cut through the demon and then sheathed the sword. He covered his face and thought, did it really work? He walked forward and thought, the atmosphere. Well, Julian is a villain after all. It's natural to be afraid of incredible power. Then one of the knights called out to him. He asked, right? The knight took his hand and thanked him. He thought they were all going to die here. The other knights supported him, as expected from Sir Julian. The protagonist didn't think it would be like this. Then Fern added, "Good work, Sir Julian." The protagonist turned his attention to him and then, placing a hand on his shoulder, asked if he could leave the report to him. He wasn't really used to such things. He agreed and then thought, he's different, definitely different. He's on a completely different level compared to the other nobles. So calm, even after defeating the two-horned demon. He's not human. Well, that's admirable. After some time, the protagonist lay down on the grass near the lake and placed his hand on his forehead. Sighing, he said that it was damn dangerous. His body began to tremble. He thought it was disgust, fear of meeting a demon, and despair. He looked at his trembling hand and thought, a real battle is much more terrible than he thought. This feeling when cutting a demon. Were such situations normal for Julian? He immersed himself in the role so well that he was afraid of himself. He looked at his reflection in the water and wondered if when you change your body, your mind changes too. Just how strong is Julian? Then he called up the system window and thought, the ability he unlocked this time is a symbiosis of Li Shihu's knowledge and Julian's experience. The system window said, trait, insight, rank, unique. He is very attentive to detail. He can easily identify a target's weak points. He can see the opponent's emotions. He deals additional damage if the enemy feels fear towards him. He thought, apparently, the combination of these two factors led to the emergence of a trait that revealed weaknesses. This would make it easier for him to address the suspicions of those around him. Now the problem was the incompleteness of the moon sword. He drew his sword from its sheath and noticed that cracks had even appeared. He thought to activate the moon sword he had to pour a lot of mana into it at once. This meant that his strength and stability were not yet up to par with a perfect moon sword. Stability. He wiped the sword and, looking at his reflection in the weapon, thought it seemed he had come up with a good way. After some time, the Council of Elders. Oren looked at the newcomer and said he could sit down. He looked at him and asked, so he's saying that Julian has figured out their plan? Erend. At that moment, he trembled with fear, biting his lips. He confirmed this and added, I think so. Oren said that he knew that his incompetence would one day hinder them. If he weren't related to the current head of the family, Before he could finish speaking, Herend bowed and apologized. One of the elders added that Shut Eyes had been acting strangely lately. They had sent a proposal to the Imperial Secretariat, stating that Shut Eyes would not be held responsible for any incidents that occurred. That's what they wanted. With that, he placed the scroll on the table and added that if anything were to happen, the Imperial family would be held accountable. He slammed his fist on the table and shouted, that sounds just like Julian. The others shouted in agreement, right. The Imperial family's watchdog, how dare he? However, Lord Oren, this could be an opportunity. He was surprised. A chance. Lord Aiden, what is he talking about? He smiled, folded his hands in front of himself and said, up until now, Julian has only followed orders. But if he starts acting independently, a change arises. This could be even more useful than when they exiled him to the north. They could profit from him. So they should just watch Julian for now. One of the elders pointed a finger at him and shouted, he's saying they should let this idiot do whatever he wants? He chuckled and replied that it was true. They should wait a little. Meanwhile, MC sat on a chair and thought. The mission had only taken a few days. But perhaps because he'd expended so much mana, he was very tired. He sat at his desk and then noticed the potted plants. He thought that the fact that the office had been redecorated to his taste calmed him down. He held the leaf of the plant to his cheek and thought, orchids bring peace even to the body of a monster like Julian. He got more out of this mission than he bargained for. Not only did he demonstrate his skills to help put an end to the rumors, but he may even have found a way to complete the moon sword. With these thoughts in mind, he opened the chest of stones and picked up one. He figured he'd find this stone useful. The idea came to him when he saw the resonance stone. In the world of Let's Kill the Demon King, everything contains mana, especially the gems from the Empire. They have the highest conductivity and capacity of mana. This is one of the reasons resonance stones are so good. By borrowing the concept of transferring mana to the resonance stone, perhaps it would be possible to use the stone as a conductor between his body and the sword. The next second, he began to concentrate his energy, but the stone in his hands cracked and shattered. After that, he clenched his trembling hand and thought, of course, this must match his mana. He must find a suitable stone. He concentrated so much that he almost missed lunch. After that, there was a knock on his door, and he said he could come in. Razrot entered the room and shouted, Sir Julian, hello. The protagonist thought, Razrot? Somehow he appears before him too often. He said the captain asks him to personally report the results of the mission to the Imperial Secretariat. He was surprised, personally? He confirmed this, and then MC stood up and, placing a hand on his shoulder, said, I see, then he should return the gems to the warehouse where they were. He thought, unfortunately, he'd have to finish the moon sword another time. Imperial Secretariat, were they really so interested in its condition that they'd asked him to come personally? Then he headed for the exit. Razrot called him, and he turned around and asked, what else? He held a broken gem in his hands and asked, "What should I do with this broken gem?" The protagonist told him to just throw it away. He agreed, surprised. Sometime later, in the Imperial Secretariat, MC walked down the corridor and looked around. He thought, unlike Shut Eyes, this place was incredibly luxurious. After that, he approached a worker and said he was Julian from Shut Eyes. He was here to see Sir Seddon Orvian from the Secretariat. The worker raised his hand and said he was currently meeting with a guest who had arrived earlier. He asked him to wait in the reception area. The protagonist agreed, and then walking further, thought, this guest seemed to be of higher rank than Julian. So this was the reception area. He hadn't seen this place in the game. Everything here was so extravagant. Then he looked at the weapon lying on the sofa and thought, a sword. Why was it left in such a place? It was completely out of place in this room. Not presentable, but reliable. A sword can tell a lot about its owner's skills. A strong body, a strong spirit. This mark, really. The next second, Rin Ronbell told him to immediately take his hands off the sword. Traitor. MC thought, this voice, he didn't even need to turn around to understand. She said this sword was a gift from the master, the daughter of the Ronbell family, an orthodox knightly family of the Empire, one of Hayden's disciples. In the game, she died at the hands of Julian, Rinne, a disciple of Hayden. Perhaps she will be one of the key figures in the exit of this game. Ronbell, one day, she will surpass Julian, first-class appearance and first-class skills. Thanks to her character and the fact that she followed the main character Hayden, she always ranked high in the polls among players. He thought that now he was playing not as Hayden, but as Julian. He looked at her and the system reported the color of negativity, disgust. She took the sword in her hand and asked, what was he going to do with the master's sword? He smiled, spreading his arms wide, and said he was just checking. He wondered if he could provoke her and get more information. He then said he didn't think that Rinne would leave her sword anywhere. She chuckled and asked, and he hadn't been able to find out? Unlike some, the teacher had manners that didn't allow her to walk around the palace with a weapon. He thought she'd hit the nail on the head. He knew this would work. After all, she was very honest and decent. Then he asked, so the teacher was Hayden, who arrived first? She frowned and asked, why should it matter to him? He thoughtfully replied that he was just asking. After all, he was his teacher. He thought it was understandable that she was negative, but he needed to find out how bad it was. Her hand trembled and a terrifying aura appeared. She asked, what? He thought he could say whatever he wanted. The system reported that the color of negativity was anger. He thought she was simply furious, as expected. He wants to apologize instead of Julian. The next second, the door to the office opened. The employee said, Miss Rinne, she must go to the secretariat. She turned and said, then she will take her leave, Sir Julian. She hopes they will not meet again. Then the employee added, Sir Julian, he is also invited in. There was an awkward pause, and then the protagonist thought he should act impudently, just like Julian. Then he smiled and said that Lady Rin should not be so cold to him. After all, they had one thing to consider. He thought perhaps he would meet him soon. She turned and snapped, no longer. He must not mention the teacher in front of her anymore. And then she walked forward. He thought, a meeting with the one he adores, but whom this body has betrayed. He is very nervous, but also anticipating. After that, in the secretariat, the man said, hello, Lady Rin, Sir Julian. Sir Julian? The whole palace was excited about his mission. He heard he did a great job with the two-horned demon. He laughed lightly and said it was nice to get some exercise. After that, Rinne told him to wait. Where did the teacher go? MC thought, right, he was waiting for him. The worker said that Sir Hayden had received the mission and had already left. She was surprised. What? The worker added, Sir Julian, it would be great if he joined. She was indignant. The two of them? This traitor and her. But why? He asked, didn't she want them to send someone from the Imperial family in case of emergency? He thought Sir Julian from Shut Eyes would be just right. The protagonist thought, Hayden, what the hell? The worker smiled and added, they should be saving the slums. The protagonist thought it can't be helped if he's already left. After all, Julian's game comes first. Then he asked, the slums? Why would they suddenly care about the poor? The worker explained that information had come in about a demon's appearance. If the Imperial family personally intervened in the affairs of the slums, many would object, but they were suitable for the task. Although they were members of Shut Eyes and the knights belonging to the Imperial family, they were not part of the Imperial family. The slums were a legacy of the time when the Empire forcibly annexed other countries. This place was formed by people from various countries who were banned from entering the Empire. The protagonists thought it was only natural that, due to their poor relationship with the Imperial family, they maintained a neutral stance towards other countries. If the apprentice, Lady Rin, performed better on the mission than he did, he would simply inherit the name of Swordmaster. It was not very good that he would have to carry out the mission with her, but since he was simply a dog of the Empire, he could not refuse. Then he smiled and said, fine, he will take this mission. Rinne screamed indignantly. What? She doesn't want to. He thought he wasn't thrilled about having to do this either. Then the worker added, Lady Rin, her teacher personally asked for this. MC raised his index finger and, smiling, asked, will she go against it? She hesitated slightly before replying that she understood, and the protagonist thought, a knight who is Reich's apprentice. On this mission, Rin would keep the traitor Julian under control. The problem was, he had no real powers. If only he could find a stone that matched his magic. Then he looked in surprise at the pendant around Rin's neck. A jolt of electricity shot through him and he asked, what? This stone? She replied, a moonstone. The next second, a pulse of energy seemed to pass from the moonstone to the protagonist, Rinny asked in surprise. What the hell? She thought she'd seen it flash. MC, smiling awkwardly, laughed and said he was sorry. He thought it resonated with his mana for a moment. Who would have thought the answer was so close? He had to get that stone. Sometime later, in a jewelry store, the employee said, Julian, long time no see. Is he looking for something? The protagonist, walking inside, removed his hood and smiling, said he was looking for a stone that would suit his magic. Did he have a moonstone? The employee scratched his head and asked, Moonstone? They didn't have it. He thought other stores had it too. Only a few collectors were interested in it, and since it wasn't easy to obtain, it was almost impossible to find. MC thought, that's a problem. Before going on a mission with Rin, he had to complete the moon sword. Then, angrily, he asked, so he's saying he can't buy it? The employee, frightened, thought, no way. He spoke to Sir Julian like he did to other customers. He had to save his life. He shouted, that's not true. He can do it. It's just going to be difficult right now. The protagonist thought, okay, then when? He's in a hurry. The worker replied that he would immediately begin searching across the country. MC wondered if Miss Rin would surely notice that his moon sword wasn't ready. Even if it was a temporary measure, he needed it. And then the day of the mission arrived. He couldn't buy the moonstone. The protagonist looked at Rin and, laughing, said, Lady Rin, someday she'll understand too. Gems are beautiful. She walked forward and said irritably, enough, it's time for them to go. He said, wrong way. She turned around and asked, what? He said that the slums were full of illegal buildings, and the winding streets were pure chaos. You shouldn't trust signs and maps. He is glad that his knowledge of the game came in handy. She took out a map and said that rather than trust Sir Julian, she would rather trust that sign. He thought that, on the one hand, she was right. The east of the slums is a wailing wall for beginners. It's a very difficult map. Even the developers admitted it. The roads here are truly terrible. Then she said that she would never fall for tricks. Traitor, he wants her to fail. She will not become like him, Sir Julian. She is the next swordmaster. He awkwardly scratched his cheek and thought, it seems there was a huge misunderstanding, as if it was easy for him before. This mission will not be easy either. Then he asked, is she really going this way? She answered, there's a reason that sign is there. He thought for a moment, and then she asked, Sir Julian, has he really been to these slums before? He thought, Li Shihu has certainly been here, but he doesn't know what to answer her about Julian. Then he smiled and asked, what do you think? She thought he was evading because he didn't want to answer. Then she asked, how did he know the way then? He raised his index finger and said it was instinct. She moved on and said they would simply go separately. He asked, but how could they work together then? Or did she value Hayden above the imperial family? She froze in place and angrily told him not to dare say the teacher's name with his mouth if he had any conscience left. He thought she hadn't noticed how she lost her temper. Her hands trembled. She thought she knew it herself. Julian was a step above her. She couldn't even count how many times she had been compared to him. If it were him, he would do it. It would be easy for him, but she was the swordmaster's apprentice. And on this mission, she would show the difference between them. Then she looked ahead in surprise and asked, huh? She thought, 011C? What's this? MC approached her and asked, what's wrong? She replied, nothing. She clutched her head and thought, 028B, 035C. It seems the traitor was showing the way correctly. 01A. Here, back again. The protagonist smiled and asked, are they here again? At that moment, a villager approached them and shouted, girl! He'd been watching her pacing around for a while. It seemed like she was new here. She asked if he was familiar with the area. He replied, well, of course. If she wanted, he could give her a tour. He couldn't do that on an empty stomach. But if she bought him a drink, how about it? She replied, okay. Then, he said his name was Baden, and hers. She replied that she was Rinna. He smiled and thought, oh, she's from the Ronbell family. What a catch. MC thought, what a strange feeling. Then he wanted to introduce himself, but Baden said he wasn't interested in the men's names, they should just follow him. The protagonist thought, Baden, I think he's heard that name somewhere. He probably didn't remember it right away, so he wasn't a particularly important character. After that, they arrived at the tavern. Baden opened the door and shouted, hey owner, he should pour them a drink. The protagonist thought, should he have a drink first and then see her off? When they approached the bar, the worker asked where they were from. Rinna replied, from the palace. He asked, is that so? Then 30 nars each. She was surprised. 30 nars? Baden came up behind her and asked if she had that much. Prices in the slums were very high. She reached into her inside pocket and said that wasn't the issue. She pulled out a bag filled with gold coins and said, but so cheap, really? Only 30 nars are needed? Baden thought, what kind of person would you expect from the daughter of such a family? Could he hit the jackpot? Then he approached the worker and whispered to him to pour the two a special liquor with a good effect, if he knew what he meant. Once they were drunk, they would split the money. The worker agreed, and after adding the necessary ingredients to the drinks, he placed the mugs on the bar. He said, here's the booze, the best liquor in the slums. Rinna took the mug and said, then. The next second, the protagonist snatched the mug from her hands and told him to wait. He asked what they put in it. Baden pointed at him and shouted, what nonsense is this? In response, he handed him the mug and told him to drink it then. He was surprised. What? The protagonist asked, or should he personally give him this to drink? Rinna shouted at him to stop. Julian. He was surprised. Julian? Just then, the worker approached him and shouted, Baden, he just brought him the imperial dog Julian? What was he thinking? He replied that everything would be fine. His lackeys are always in this bar, only the best monsters of the slums, and he is the same. The next second, he reached for the weapon in his inner pocket. After that, the MC smashed the mug in his hands and said that his time to respond was up. Was he already attacking? At that moment, one of the bar patrons swinging his sword charged, but the protagonist grabbed him by the neck, holding him in his hand. At that moment, another bar patron snuck up from behind, but MC quickly attacked him. Rinny looked around in surprise and asked what the hell was going on. The frightened patron said there was only one of them. The protagonist said he didn't care what they were up to, but they didn't want to create any more noise in the slums than they already had. Then he aimed a shard from the mug at Baden's neck. The others stopped in fear, and he wondered if everyone here was in cahoots with him. Then he said, Mr. Baden, why did he stop talking halfway through? He should tell his friends what he was planning. Come on. Or does he want the same thing to happen to him as the glass? He trembled with fear and then said, forward. One of the patrons shouted, Baden. He shouted, didn't they hear Sir Julian? They have to leave immediately. After that, they headed for the exit, and the MC, placing the bloody shard on the bar counter, said they had decided to cooperate. If he answered a few questions, he would allow him to confess. Baden was surprised. Confess? The protagonist sat down opposite him and said, it's better than dying, isn't it, Baden? He replied that he agreed. After a while, they went outside, and the protagonist said that he seemed suspicious when he offered to be their guide. Who would have thought that he would lead them straight to a bandit lair? He thought they were just a bunch of scum, but they also had something to plunder. In his hands, he held the notes he had received. Rinna said it was her fault for not realizing this sooner. He replied that it was natural. It would be strange if a lady of noble birth had met such people before. She lowered her head, and he wondered if she was losing her confidence. Then she asked how he knew. He turned around and asked, what? She asked how he knew Baden had mixed something in. He asked, so she's interested? She confirmed it and asked him to tell her. MC thought she was so interested that she was willing to gain knowledge from a man she hated, putting her own development above momentary shame as expected of Rinna. Of course, he would prefer if she weren't hostile towards him. Then he said that he sensed something ominous from the glass, but even before they entered there, he sensed hostility using mana detection. She was surprised. Mana detection? At that point, he used that and added living beings, objects, phenomena, anything that contains some kind of mana, and mana reacts to other mana. Before entering there, he used his mana to detect mana hostile to him. She said, like the ultrasonic waves of bats. He nodded. You could say that. He thought it was usually a method used by mages, but thanks to Julian's overflowing mana, he was able to pull it off easily. Then Rin said she wanted to ask him one more thing. He hadn't asked Baden about the demon, only about the living conditions in the slums. He said that was true. She said, but they weren't here to find out who was living and how, to find out if a demon had appeared here. The protagonist smiled and said, of course, that was it. She looked at him in surprise, and he asked how much she knew about demonization. She said it was a phenomenon in which fragments of the demon king Barbados parasitize non-human living beings and turn them into demons. MC said that was usually the case, but the slum area was unusual. The capital near the slums was surrounded by resonance stones, so no demon could penetrate it. There are no forests or animals nearby, only people, she said in surprise. So the only carrier, he doesn't mean to say they're people, does he? He smiled and thought that's exactly what happened in the game. After that, he nodded. Right, he's sure people are being demonized in this area. She put her fingers to her head and said she was stupid for thinking for a moment that she could believe him. After that, he held up 3 fingers and said, 3 families. That's how many families bought fever reducers this week. They say that during the demonization process, the temperature rises. If he was wrong, Lady Rin, he will follow any of her orders. She thought, what? And she should believe this nonsense? After a while, she sighed and said, well, they have one last family to check. The protagonist noticed that she looked pleased. She said that he said something about human demonization. If it's not true, isn't that bad news? He answered, of course. He thought this was the last one, if only what he said were true. Then he knocked on the door and asked if anyone was home. A man opened the door slightly and said, who? The protagonist looked at him and thought he hadn't been demonized yet, but judging by the color of the negative, he was hiding something. Besides, the smell he remembered well during the escort mission to the resonance stone was definitely demon blood. Then Rin greeted him and said that they had come from the palace. MC added, he was Julian from Shut Eyes. The man screamed in fear. Julian from Shut Eyes? They have to get out. Get out of his house. He tried to close the door, but the next second, the protagonist snatched it away, throwing the man back. After that, he shook his hands and said, thank you for your cooperation. Rinny was indignant. Sir Julian, He should at least explain, but he moved on and said, "She's too compassionate." She indignantly screamed, He turned around and said, "I hope this doesn't come back to haunt her one day." After that, he continued forward, and she approached the fallen man and said that they were here to investigate, not punish. "He thinks that's what they wanted?" MC said. "Lady Rin, they only expect results." She was surprised. "What?" He looked at the table and said they were just having dinner. Judging by the information they had, he and his son live alone, but the table was set for 3. The man pointed forward and shouted, "They had a guest." The protagonist smiled, running a spoon through the soup, and thought that this soup looked watery, so it wasn't just an antipyretic. Then he smiled and, pointing at the soup, asked, "Did they feed the guest a sleeping pill that they slipped into the soup?" After that, he heard a sound behind the door and asked, "So there's a demon behind that door?" Rinna, perplexed, looked at him. The next second, the man suddenly ran forward and shouted, "Son, he has to run." He inserted the key into the lock as quickly as possible, and removing the chain, told him to run faster. Then he asked in surprise, "Son?" He only managed to scream as the demon devoured his body. Rin, reaching for her sword, shouted, "Demon!" She thought, could a human really have been demonized? First, she needed to defeat him. She quickly ran to attack, trying to attack the eye, then jumped back. MC looked at his partner's trembling hands and thought, "This sword, really?" So, Rin hasn't awakened yet? That's why she asked him about mana. In that case, she could be in danger. He walked forward and she said she didn't need help. He took off his cape and asked, "Do you need help?" It's part of his job. He can't let the disciple of such a great teacher get hurt. He doesn't want to get involved in any more ridiculous incidents. The problem is, the moon sword is still not perfect. He doesn't want her to become more suspicious. After that, the demon, swinging his arms, charged, and the protagonist thought that he could overcome it himself with the big difference between their levels. He used the trait, Insight. After analyzing the situation, he charged and dodged the demon's attack. MC thought he dealt him a strong blow. The next second, the demon was surprised when Rin had charged. The protagonist, watching this, thought, "Damn, has he recovered already?" Then he shouted, "Lady Rin, she must create an opening. He's attacking again." She shouted, "What?" It's hard to even hold him back. Then she looked at the table and thought, "That's it." She grabbed a bowl of soup and threw it at the demon's face. He grabbed his head with his hands and then began shaking his head. She thought, "Good, he's disoriented. I need to focus on the strike." Then she concentrated energy into her sword. But at that moment, the demon grabbed her with such force that blood gushed from her mouth. She thought, "Damn, did he find her by scent?" She was too arrogant. She couldn't do anything. She let go of the sword and thought, how will she look her teacher in the eye now? The next second, the demon opened his mouth wide, and MC shouted, "Lady Rin." She looked at him and shouted, "Julian, what is he?" The next second, he said, "Good job." He concentrated powerful energy around himself, then analyzed the demon and charged, plunging the sword into the monster's chest. After that, the demon released Rinna from his hand, and she jumped on top of the monster, driving its body further into the sword. After that, the demon fell to the ground, and she said, "He pierced the demon even without the moon sword. How is that possible?" The protagonist smiled and said that this worthless thing is unworthy of using the moon sword. He thought, it looks natural, right? Then he said they could return. After a while, he thought this mission had been successfully completed. Lady Rin didn't suspect him of anything, which was good. After that, Rinna said that the entire reward for this mission was his. She hadn't done anything. He thought, of course, she was too proud to profit at Julian's expense, but he told her not to say that. Although it was true that she hadn't been able to do anything about the demon. He thought that Julian, he would never have simply said something nice. Then she said she didn't like him. He smiled and noticed that she was being straightforward. Then she added, "The teacher always said that with power comes responsibility." Defeating the demon was impressive, but seeing how he recklessly used force even against the innocent, she understood why the teacher had driven him away. He lacked restraint. MC smiled and said, "Restraint is the tool of cowards." She asked, "Is he saying the teacher is a coward?" He came closer and said, "He is a man far from noble. He is not just an aristocrat who must maintain restraint throughout his life." Turning around, he added, "She must realize that such people exist in this world." She asked in surprise, what was that supposed to mean? Then he waved his hand and said, in any case she tried hard. He was grateful that she shared her profits from the mission. She watched him go and, sighing, thought, it really is difficult to understand him. Restraint is a trait not only of aristocrats but also of knights. At that moment, a carriage stopped next to her and her uncle asked, is she returning? She noticed Uncle Ergen. He noticed that she looked tired. She should get in, he will give her a ride to the estate, she agreed. And then they set off. He looked at her and asked, the mission must have been difficult. Everything went well? She answered, so. She is grateful, Uncle Ergen. Then he said, by the way, that man next to her. She said it was Sir Julian from Shut Eyes. He said, he thought so. He didn't know him by sight. Lately, the elder has been constantly worried about his actions. Rumor has it that he put pressure on them through the imperial family. She said, that's how it is. He folded his arms and added, Despite the fact that he is also a noble, he is putting pressure on the Council of Elders. What else can you expect from a bastard offspring? She thought. So that's what he meant. She remembered the protagonist's words, and Ergen said to stay away from him. He is dangerous. Besides, she took the place of Hayden's apprentice. Perhaps he was not as good as they thought. She said that is not true, uncle. She cannot judge the rest, but his skills are not a lie. It is annoying, but he is strong. After a while, the protagonist approached the table where Odwin was sitting. She folded her hands in front of her face and said, Julian, what the hell did he do? He smiled awkwardly and asked, what the hell did she mean? He thought, what? Was the bar asking for compensation? Or did the slum dwellers complain because he scared them? Had he gotten too into character and done a bunch of bad things that could get him into trouble? Then she looked at the documents and said, Baden, the criminal Shut-Eyes had been monitoring, had confessed. When they asked him why, he said his name, shaking. His mission was to verify information about demons. MC thought, phew, so it has to do with him. Then he spread his arms out to the sides and said, a little belatedly, but maybe he realized the gravity of his crimes. He doesn't know anything about it. He has no idea how he knew his name. She said, that's funny. He definitely did something again. He should check the payment for the mission and come back. The protagonist looked at the documents and thought, payment means money, right? He didn't have enough money, so he wondered how much he got. Not long before, a worker approached him and said he had received a letter from the jeweler. He asked, really? The jeweler said they didn't have enough nar to buy the moonstone. He thought, well, of course, Julian. He never put money aside. Maybe he can make up the difference with what he needs. What? How much? 11,000 nar? Aren't nars the same exchange rate as dollars? Then 15 million won in a month? Even considering Lady Rin gave him her share, earning that much in 2 missions is amazing. Then Odwin shook her head and said that it couldn't be helped. It was less than usual, but because of his injury, he had a lot of days off. He thought, what? Less than usual? Although he's just a game character, that's his attitude towards money. Wait, minus the upkeep and expenses? Well, that's normal. Julian loves all kinds of art. What's this? Installment payments. The final payment is 900 nar. He thought, is that all that's left? Julian is simply financially disabled. He's in trouble. He needs a lot more nar to buy a lot of moonstones, and Julian has no savings. And then he said, Commander Odwin. She asked, what? He asked, are there any other missions by any chance? She noticed that this was the first time he asked such a question. Are you sure you need money? Unfortunately, no, but she will tell him when something becomes available. So she told him not to buy things he can't afford, but he completely ignored her. He thought that he wouldn't be so angry if he bought them himself. He said, okay. Then she leaned her face on her hand and said that if he sold everything in his gallery, he could buy an entire castle. He turned around and said, exactly. She asked, what? He turned around and shouted that he would simply sell everything. She looked at him in surprise and said that he had become even stranger. After some time, Ergen, the Council of Elders, said, this monster defeated a demon even without the moon sword. He is dangerous. He cannot be controlled. Aiden, the Council of Elders, noted that this was true. Then the worker bowed and said, Mr. Aiden, he will escort him. He said that they needed to discuss something. After that, he sat at the table and said, so the Council of Elders still has a bad attitude towards Julian. So, on the last mission, he defeated a demon even without the moon sword. The worker confirmed this, and then he added, it really is a monster. The worker said, should he continue the previous task he gave him? He pointed his finger at him and confirmed it. He would lure this monster to his side and make him part of his power. Sometime later, the ID Cosmos Art Gallery. MC, looking around, thought that he'd decided to come here right away, but he didn't even know if he'd be able to sell anything well. At that moment, a worker ran up to him and said, welcome, Sir Julian. He took his hand and, smiling, added that he was Perso, the gallery's appraiser. The protagonist, smiling, thanked him for making time for him so quickly. He followed him and said, well, what's wrong with him? It's an honor to serve the famous Julian from Shut-Eyes. Is this the painting you're appraising? The protagonist removed the cape from the painting. Perso looked at the painting in surprise, then, after examining it more closely with a magnifying glass, said that, judging by the technique, it looked like a painting by Coruscant Vincent. MC peered behind him and asked, is it the same? Then he turned and said, it's a fake. The protagonist clutched his head and thought, Julian, did he buy paintings without even looking at them? Should he have brought something else? It was hanging at the entrance, so he thought it was some kind of masterpiece. Having such a fake would tarnish Julian's reputation. Then Perso said that this was the first time he'd seen such a high-quality fake, so he wanted to buy it. The protagonist clarified, even though it was a fake, he confirmed it. After all, it was in perfect condition. How about 1,000 nars? He thought that was the lesser evil, but 1,000 nars still wouldn't be enough to buy the moonstones. Then the worker said he'd draw up a contract. He could look around while he waited. The protagonist said, of course. At that moment, Eileen approached him and asked if he really wanted to make this deal. This painting was undoubtedly original. Julian looked at her with a surprised look and asked what brought her here. And she says that this is an original. She said that her cousin has several works on display here, but that is not the main thing now. Pearson began to worry about what was happening. and she said that there are no artists in the empire who work so well with oils. Besides, that signature in the corner definitely belongs to Carusius. He, looking very worried, said that this cannot be. He did not see the signature. He looked at this appraiser and asked with an angry look, so he wanted to deceive him? He fell to the ground and, looking frightened, loudly begged for forgiveness. He was about to reach out to him, but she grabbed him and loudly told him that he should stop. Mistakes can happen during appraisals. People are prone to making mistakes. He thought that he did not even notice how he began to threaten him and almost pointed his sword at him. You can't make such a scene in front of many spectators. He pulled his hand back, agreed, and said that people might think that he was some kind of villain. He asked with a frightening look, then how would he value this painting now? Perso knelt before him and loudly asked for forgiveness once again. He was trembling with horror and said that if it really was an original, the gallery would not be able to afford to buy it. Even if they sold everything, they would still not have enough. The protagonist chuckled, put his hand on his shoulder, and said that he should think carefully about where his incompetence could lead him in life. Now they had a problem. What to do with the painting? Eileen said that she would help him. He immediately turned to her and asked, "Is this true?" She sighed with displeasure, agreed, and said that she knew one person who would definitely buy any of Carusius's paintings. He thought about it, and she said that in return, she would have two conditions. He will not punish this person here. He agreed and thought that he did not intend to do this anyway. She hid her embarrassed face behind her fan and said that she also wanted him to help her with something. This matter required his intervention. He agreed and said that he didn't have any tasks right now anyway. They shook hands in agreement, and she said that he shouldn't misunderstand her. She wasn't helping him out of sympathy. This was in response to his help in Julin, because she didn't like to remain indebted. He said with a smile, which meant it was his turn to repay the favor. So what exactly did she want from him? She told him about a monster that attacked a guard late at night. She said that it seemed like a ghost was just a rumor created by the students. Sometime later, at VL Academy, in the corridor of the old building, Eileen said that the faculty didn't take it seriously at first. However, around midnight, strange sounds began to come from the old building, and more guards were injured. MC asked with a puzzled look, if it wasn't a ghost, then what? She said with a serious expression that she thought it was a demon. He asked if she thought a demon could have gotten into the academy. She agreed and said that the academy was well protected from demons, but they could have gotten inside through a breach when the resonance stone was weakened. Lately, the situation had been increasingly tense, and fewer people were willing to carry out night patrols. She wanted to sort it out, but it turned out to be not so easy. Hardy Godfrey, a professor at VL Academy, approached them and asked if she had decided to resort to someone else's help. He called him by name and said that it was a great honor for him to meet him here. She looked at him with a displeased expression and asked if he didn't see her. Maybe he should say hello too? He asked with a smile if they were really close enough to exchange such pleasantries. Besides, she called such an interesting person. She said that it was all for the student's safety. He was the best person to deal with the demon. He said that if she wanted to get rid of the label of being from a branch family, she needed to try harder. She said with a smirk that if anyone should try, it was him. Should she remind him how he barely passed his dissertation last time? It would be better for him to focus on that instead of wasting his time. He became indignant because of this and said that the scum from the branch families do not know their place. She became angry because of this and loudly asked what he said. Julian walked towards him and silently grabbed his sword. Eileen asked him to stop and wondered, did he take out his sword? Was he angry because of the insult to the branch families, or was it because of her? He did not answer and swung his sword, which scared them both very much. He dealt a strong blow, destroyed the wall, and they both noticed the demon hiding inside. With a calm expression on his face, he began to attack the demons with his sword, but a loud scream caught his attention. Hardy, looking frightened, said that they had to save him. He had a demon on his back. He was very scared when he saw several monsters standing nearby. The protagonist, smiling, said that demons didn't care whether he was from the main family or the branch family. They would attack anyone without mercy. If he wanted to stay alive, he'd better start begging the branch family members for help. He killed one small monster next to him with a sword strike and said that he shouldn't be so dramatic. Eileen, with a serious expression, pointed her finger forward and told him to look there. They saw many small demons gathering together and growing in size. The demon completely transformed, and a frightened Hardy quickly ran away from the scene. He, smirking, channeled energy into the blade of his sword and said that so this is their true form. The way these weak monsters band together and try to cause trouble is even funny. The monster tried to attack him with its paw, but he dodged it and swung his sword. He ran close enough and slashed at the demon's head with his sword. He watched and thought that the demons were coming out and the main body was getting smaller. He charged and delivered several quick sword strikes. Eileen stood to the side and created a barrier that was hit by several rocks. He killed the demon and sheathed his sword as it fell apart. She began to repair the wall with magic and asked how he knew there were demons there. He said with a smile that it was a secret. He thought he couldn't say that when he used the color negative on Hardy. He found an unfamiliar color. No one here would understand the game system. She said with a smile that even he looked down on members of the branch families. He shocked her. He didn't understand what she meant, and she asked if he didn't remember what he himself had said. He called her half Donatienne. She thought it was strange to hear such words from someone who had always only cared about his own career, and now suddenly stood up for a representative of a branch family. It was as if he had become the same person he was during his time at the academy. He thought with a slightly worried look, so she held a grudge for those words? She said that others were afraid of him, so they would never say anything directly, but his dismissive attitude towards branch families was commonplace for her. He said with a calm expression that no matter what family, everyone's blood was the same color. Then he misspoke. Eileen was embarrassed by what she heard and thought, did he just apologize? She embarrassedly thanked him, and MC asked what she was thanking him for. She said with a slightly dissatisfied look that she was grateful that he fulfilled her request. After that, she finished restoring the wall, wiped the sweat from her forehead, and said with a smile that she was finally done. Now that he had helped her deal with the demon, she would introduce him to the man who would buy the painting. Sometime later, he met the man in the office, who began to examine the painting. He said with a joyful smile that he never thought he would be able to see such a masterpiece in his lifetime. He sat in front of him with a smile and asked what he thought about it. This work by Carusius had not been presented to the world. Red Vineyards. Alram Chorny, the vice dean at the Academy of VL, said with a smile that the wheat fields swayed violently under the hanging dark clouds, and black crows flew high in the sky. Julian, with a calm expression on his face, thought that he seemed to understand art. To him, everything looked the same. He said that behind the wheat fields one could see roads leading to nowhere. Of course, he didn't know what was hidden behind it. The reason this painting radiated loneliness was because the artist wanted to show his sadness to his younger brother. He sent this painting to his brother, who supported him financially, along with a letter. The first line read, "I put all my sorrows and loneliness into this painting." He looked at him with a puzzled expression and wondered if everything was really connected. He agreed and said that he had said everything correctly. Alram looked at him with a displeased expression. He noticed this and thought it was the color of negativity. Why was he suddenly suspicious of him? Is there something wrong with the painting? That can't be. Judging by his reaction and Eileen's, it's definitely an original. However, then what does he suspect him of? Alram called him and asked if he really knows anything about this painting. To be honest, it seems like he only came here because he needed money. He would just pay a fair price and buy the painting, but he would like to do business with those who understand value. The protagonist thought that in that case, it seemed like he wouldn't be able to sell it for a high price, even if they came to an agreement. He seemed to say that this was his last work. He said that Carusius died shortly after completing this masterpiece. Because of this, the painting has even more value. Is he right? He sighed, agreed with this, and said that the artist literally captured the place where he died. It seems he knows quite well after all. He apologizes for this misunderstanding. Then maybe they can talk about the price? He agreed and was glad that it worked. Alram showed him 4 fingers and asked what he thought about such an amount. He thought that 40,000 nar was not bad, but perhaps he should haggle some more. He said with a small smile that this was a work that marked the beginning of the golden age just after his death. He must understand the value of this painting. He said that in that case he would add another 100,000 nar, and that would make 500,000. It seemed like a fair price. He was very surprised by what he heard and thought if the exchange rate was equal to the dollar, then that was about 500 million won. Was this painting really worth that much? Alram brought him out of his thoughts by calling his name, and he smiled and said that now he saw that he really understood the value of this painting. That was wonderful. He agreed to make a deal. MC thought he was saying that the gallery wouldn't be able to afford it even if everything was sold out. Now he understood what he meant. He apologizes to his character for doubting his artistic acumen. After some time, Eileen entered the office and asked the deputy if he had called her. He turned to her, called her by name, and said that she could come in and sit down. The incident in the old building. She agreed and said that everything was resolved. He poured tea into a cup with magic and said that he had been worried about it. What a relief. Was it difficult to cope with this? She remembered Hardy with a displeased look but smiled and said that it had been without any particular difficulties. He looked into the cup and said that he apologized for burdening her with such work. What he told her now should remain between them. It was highly likely that this incident was the work of the Dawn Society. She was a little surprised by this and asked, however, why do they need the academy? Alram said that he did not know the reason, but there was obvious circumstantial evidence. Apparently, they took advantage of the weakening of the resonance stone. We need to keep this a secret to prevent panic among the students. She drank tea with a slightly worried look and thought that the Dawn Society was a group of people worshipping demons that had recently appeared in the Empire. Why would they attack the academy? He said that, however, she shouldn't worry too much. Security has been tightened, and they will do everything to protect the students. Eileen agreed and said that this time they managed to cope with Julian's help. She looked at the painting and asked, "By the way, did their meeting go well?" He laughed, agreed, and said that thanks to that, he got his hands on the masterpiece. She said with a smile that she wanted to thank him for his help in exterminating the demons, but it seemed he left early. He agreed and said that as soon as he received the payment, he left in a hurry. He said something about a moonstone. It seemed he needed to acquire it in large quantities. She was very surprised by what she heard and asked loudly, "Did he mention a moonstone?" She urgently needed to go. He remained in his office and said that young people were always in a hurry. After some time she came into the establishment, but the employee bowed and apologized. Eileen, looking worried, said that she was sure there was enough. The employee said that he bought more than he expected. She asked, in that case, when would they appear again? He said that this time, it would take longer. She, looking very dissatisfied and worried, said that, however, she needed it for research. She began to cry and loudly called his name. At the same time, a blacksmith named Ruger Orland from the Twilight Flame Forge asked, "Does this mean he wants him to forge a sword using this stone?" The protagonist agreed, holding a pile of these stones with a wide smile, and asked if he could make him a sword that would itself be like moonlight. The blacksmith loudly said that it was not a sword, but just a decoration. His honor would not allow him to do such a thing. He said with a small smile that he was going to use it for its intended purpose, however. He still refused and said loudly that it was nothing more than an expensive trinket. He should look at the drawing himself. Something like that can't be called a weapon. If he wants a luxury item for himself, he should look somewhere else. Twilight Flame makes weapons only for knights, only swords, like Sir Reich's, which he once wanted. MC said that he wants to engrave a mana canal into his sword. He leaned towards him with a displeased look and said that even so, embedding a moonstone into the base of a sword is complete idiocy. It will not be possible to fight with a sword made of a precious stone, which is even more fragile than ordinary metal. He thought about it, but a girl approached them, apologized to him and said that they create swords that are the face of their forge. The crest of their forge is engraved on each such sword, so if such a sword breaks easily, it will damage their reputation. He thoughtfully thought that this was a problem. He wanted to forge it here because that Haydenreich's sword came from this forge. He said with a smile that then he would make it so that this sword wouldn't break easily. Ruger asked if he thought it was possible. He agreed and said that if he didn't believe it, he could believe in his abilities. He put a bag of money on the counter and said that first they had to create the sword. This was more than the standard payment. If by chance the sword broke during testing, he would not ask for the money or materials back. He looked at him incredulously and wondered if he was really that sure. He took a deep breath, agreed, and said that if the sword broke, they would consider that the order had never been made. A few days later, he finished creating the sword, handed it to him, and said that here it is. Their best blacksmiths worked on it day and night. They failed several times before completing it. Can he really use this weapon? Julian took the sword in his hand with a smile, and the system notified that the perfect sword technique had been activated. He agreed and asked, "Then should we begin the test?" After that, he went outside and said with a smile that so many people had gathered here. The girl said in a confused voice that everyone was just curious. If he was uncomfortable, she could ask everyone to leave. He refused, and Ruger called him and said that this armor was specially prepared for the test. He was surprised when he saw it and said that, however, this was no ordinary armor. He agreed and said that the thickness was only 1 centimeter. It was practically like a piece of steel. Since they were conducting a test, everything must be done properly. He should try to cut through it. He began to laugh with a smile and said that they were well prepared. He took the sword, from which powerful energy emanated, agreed, and said that an easy target would not be so interesting. He watched it from the side and said that even if he activated the moon sword, such a structure would not withstand it. He raised the sword above his head and thought that it felt different now. It was as if the sword had found its way. He swung the sword and released a powerful wave of energy that destroyed the armor. Everyone was shocked by this and thought that he was holding the overflowing mana in the sword and making it spin continuously. The protagonist thought with a wide smile that this is what a real moon sword is. The girl, looking shocked, said that he didn't even put in much effort. However, the armor created by their forge shattered into pieces. He asked with a smile, "So what does he think now?" The system notified that the unfinished moon sword trait had been upgraded to the moon sword. He was happy about this and thought with a smile that he poured a lot of aura into it, but there wasn't even a scratch left on the sword. This is the perfect moon sword. He finally succeeded. Ruger said that it seems he underestimated him. MC sheathed his sword and said that sometimes it's better to show than to explain. He added that he should remember, however, that if the sword breaks, his reputation will also be ruined. He said with a smile that of course, he will take care of it. Sometime later, Hayden came to the forge and said that the armor created by the Twilight Flame Forge was cut so cleanly. Did he really do it? He turned around and said that it seemed like he was here. He picked up a piece of the broken armor and said that however he could not feel its aura. It was still amazing. An aura meant solely for cutting. He would like to see how he did it. Rinna looked at him and wondered why he was talking about this. He looked at her and asked if she was thinking about Julian. By the way, they were on a mission together recently. How did he perform? She said with a slightly dissatisfied look that he was very strong. He asked, but she did not notice anything strange. She did not understand him and asked what he was talking about. He asked with a serious expression if he looked like someone from the Society of the Dawn. She was surprised by this and asked if he thought he was a member of the Society of the Dawn. At night, he walked down the street with a satisfied smile and held 2 swords on his belt. He thought that he had a feeling that he was becoming more and more like this character. However, he must not forget that his goal is to return to his world. He can't live in this body forever. That's right, this world will come to an end one day. In other words, the end of the game, when Hayden stops the birth of the Demon King. It's not about his character's death, it needs to be stopped. At what point in the story now? It seems like the Society of Dawn should be appearing right now. They are a group of heretics who will stop at nothing to resurrect the Demon King Barbatos. They are Hayden and Ree's sworn enemies, especially for her, because her father was killed by the Society of Dawn. He wants to take their side, but it won't be easy. Then, just like in the game, should he join the Society of Dawn to get information? He reached for his sword, and the system notified that the trait Incredible Instincts was activated. He asked loudly with a serious expression, "Who is there?" He didn't see anyone and wondered if he imagined it. That was definitely not it. The ability definitely worked. He said with a smile that he didn't know who it was, but he had already sensed their mana, so they should come out. 2 hooded people came out to him. He laughed and said that it seemed like they had met before. He looked at them and thought that he remembered that she used black magic at a very high level. Eleanor de Michel, the Bishop of the Dawn Society, and it seemed he could guess who was next to her. It was Hayden's sworn enemy. He called her by name with a smile and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. She laughed, began to remove her hood and said that it was surprising that he recognized her even in this form, as expected of him. He said with a smile that he even guessed why they were here. She clapped her hands with a joyful look and said that, since he already knew their intentions, the conversation would go faster. She would be glad if he gave his answer as soon as possible. The protagonist, with a slightly worried look, thought that he didn't know at all, because he was just bluffing. He said that he would like to think about it longer. She said that it seemed like it would be difficult. He was the one who contacted the Society of Dawn first and made them an offer, right? He also said that he wanted to join them. He thought with a worried look that he didn't think that things had already gone this far. Solving problems for this character had already become a routine. Whatever path he chose, after losing to Hayden, he envied the demon's powers and joined the Society of Dawn. However, he didn't have to do it now. He asked if there was a time limit for joining. She agreed that there was none and asked, he understands that they can interpret it differently, right? What if he uses this as an excuse to capture them? Perhaps his desire to join is just an excuse. After all, he is a loyal dog of the Empire, behind closed eyes. He thought with a slightly worried look that they suspected him. He was not here to investigate. If he joined and was caught, it would be the end for him. It would lead to the worst possible ending for him. If Hayden found out that he joined the Dawn Society, it would end with the death of one of them, and both options were bad. Then he would never get out of this game. What should he do now? He said that he had never thought that he was suspected of such a thing. Eleanor said that he knew too much. If he tried to escape, she did not finish, and the man next to her said that this meant that they would not let him leave here. He went to the MC and he thought that Monsignor, a fighting unit of the Dawn Society, was far superior to ordinary knights. He took off his cloak and said loudly that he better decide quickly, otherwise he, Pelcor the Iron Fist, would crush him. He pointed to his face and asked, he remembers this scar, right? He left it on him and it still hurts. He looked worried, wondering if this was his character doing it again. His antics were really tiring him out. He looked at him calmly and said that it meant they had met before. He was asking for forgiveness because he couldn't remember something so insignificant. He hid his worry behind a smile and thought that if he continued to imitate him, he would definitely get into trouble. Pelcor ran out of his sight with incredible speed, ran up from behind, and said that he would see how long he could act like this. The system notified that the exceptional swordsman trait had been activated. Julian drew his sword and blocked his blow with his fist. He looked worried, thinking that he had taken an old iron sword instead of a moon sword. Muscle memory was terrifying him. Now he just had to hold it off as long as possible. After that, they began to exchange blows very quickly, but neither of them was able to inflict serious injuries. His sword cracked, but he jumped back and thought that it was too dangerous. He needed to regroup first. Pelcor looked at him with a smile, ran very close and swung his fist. He delivered a very strong punch and threw him into the nearest wall. He laughed loudly after that and asked how he felt after being beaten by something so insignificant. He was still conscious, gritted his teeth in anger, and wondered why he had to deal with this. He was tired of suffering because of things he didn't even do. A powerful energy engulfed his body and he stood up. He looked at it and asked if he still had the strength to move. Eleanor, with a slightly worried look, said that he should wait. Something was wrong here. The system notified that emotions had reached their peak. The protagonist looked at them with a very angry expression and said that this pissed him off. The system notified that the unique feature of the eye's insight was activated. With a wide grin, he began to draw his new sword from its sheath, which was engulfed in red energy. She looked at it and wondered, did something change? Pelkor asked loudly with a worried look. What was wrong with his sword? He will destroy this sword of his too. He didn't have time to do anything, because he swung his sword and released powerful energy. He was shocked by what happened, noticed the wounds on his hand and screamed loudly in pain. He stood in front of him with a wide smile and held the sword in his hand. He became very angry, ran towards him and started attacking with his fist. He dodged this blow, counterattacked with the sword, putting powerful energy into it. It left a long wound on his torso, and he screamed loudly in pain. He became even more angry because of this, attacked with his fist again and loudly said that he must leave here. He easily dodged this attack and struck again with his sword. Because of this, Pelkor fell to his knee and with a frightened expression thought, so this is what his real strength is? MC laughed broadly, looking at him, and thought about the blood, the sensation of cutting flesh, and the horror in his opponent's eyes. For some reason, he felt very good. The system notified him of the sighted eyes trait. Only those with narrow eyes can use this trait. It manifests only during strong emotional outbursts. Physical abilities improve, and he also sees more than usual. Pelkor knelt before him and asked him to stop. The system notified him that he was becoming very aggressive. He swung his sword with an evil grin and asked, what if he doesn't want this? He struck him with the sword, called him by name, and said that the nickname Iron Hand no longer suited him. He raised his head, grabbing him by the hair, and he, looking very frightened, asked for mercy. Eleanor hugged him from behind and asked, can they stop here? She used dark energy, and the system notified that the sighted eyes trait was deactivated. His hands began to shake, and he wondered, did he do this? It's common for characters with narrow eyes to become stronger when they open their eyes wide. However, his character's trait was simply going wild. This was too dangerous. He turned to her and asked with a smile, wasn't he the one who started it? She continued using dark magic, agreed, and said he was too rude. He asked, but she was just watching it? She channeled dark energy into him with one hand, began to heal Pelkor with the other, and said that, however, when he was beating him she did not interfere either. He thought that it seemed that because of this magic, he could not move. She leaned towards him and said that, however, after this battle, his esteem in her eyes had increased. Stop wasting time. He should join them. The system notified that the trait is a birthmark. The opposite sex easily falls in love with it. She asked, did he have anything to lose? Julian put his hand on her shoulder, agreed, and said that, however, he would still like to think about it some more. He began to walk away from them, and she thought with a displeased look that, just like their first meeting in the palace, her trait did not work on him. She called his name and asked how it was. Had something changed since the time he did that to his eye? Pelkor refused and said that except that he was more furious. She said that she thought so. The rumors about memory loss were lies. This is a personal test. She hopes that he will not spread this among the other bishops. He agreed with an embarrassed expression, and she thought with a dissatisfied look that after all, her trait does not work only on him. Sometime later, the protagonist lay down in his room. His hands trembled from fatigue, and he thought that he got out of this situation only thanks to his new eyes. But he cannot rely on something like that. The Society of Dawn is not that simple. What should he do about it? If he joins the Society of Dawn, Hayden will kill him, and he will not be able to return to his world. However, if he reports on them, the members of the Society of Dawn hiding in the palace will get rid of him. Still, he must join them. He will gather as much information as possible and see the ending in which he stops the revival of the Demon King with his own hands. This is the only way to return home. Sometime later, he came to the Genmel Monastery and thought that the Church of the Sun God has the largest number of followers on the Rosenda continent. The monastery is associated with them. People looked at him with worried faces and asked why he, who does not believe in God, came here. He probably came to kill someone. The church minister asked with a worried look what brought him to the monastery. MC said with a smile that he was here to meet the abbot. He was worried about this and thought that no one warned him. A nun came to him and said with a smile that she would take him there. He should follow her. He looked at her and thought that they sent an escort in time. They walked to a deserted place. Dark energy began to emanate from her, and she said that he arrived earlier than expected. To be honest, she thought he would refuse. He called Eleanor with a smile and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. He thought that she removed the camouflage spell right before his eyes. He said with a smile that they were quite brave, hiding the base of the Dawn Society in such a large monastery. She turned to him and said with a serious expression that the archbishop was waiting for him. He asked him to be polite. right, he said with a smile that he would think about it. He thought that she was much more cautious than the last time they met. Is it because the leader of the Dawn Society is there? They entered inside. People looked at him and said that it was really him. So he really decided to come? The masked cult leader looked at him and asked with a smile. Apparently this is Julian? He looked at him with a smile and thought that even though he was called the cult leader, he did not seem old-fashioned at all. In fact, he was an ordinary peasant chosen by a sacred relic. The leader of the Dawn Society, Tenelron. Eleanor knelt, called him and said that he should kneel before the archbishop. He looked at her with a smirk and asked why he had to do that. She looked at him with a worried look and asked if he hadn't joined them. He had to prove his loyalty. He laughed and said that he didn't come here because of some faith. He was here to establish partnerships. He thought that for his character to become devout was nonsense. It would be better to act so confidently. He said that they coveted his power, and he needed the power of the god they worshipped. The others were outraged by this, and asked how dare he, an arrogant freak, flaunting his pride. Tenelron raised his hand and said that they should stop. If he was offering partnerships, then there was no reason for such an attitude. Everyone except him and Eleanor should leave them. They agreed and began to leave the hall. When they left, he chuckled and said that he was as amazing as the rumors said. He started patting him on the shoulder and said with a smile that it was wonderful. He even liked it better this way. He stepped aside and said that they should come with him. He wanted to show him something. Only bishops have access to this place. It's because there is a sacred relic here. What is the reason why he is showing him such a place? The protagonist followed him and said that he didn't even know this. He said that he just didn't want to send him away like this. Otherwise, he would become their enemy. However, him working together with the Dawn Society, it was exciting. He asked with a smile. He says, will they be okay with him being just an ally and not a follower? He agreed and said that he would give him the rank of bishop. Then he would be able to use the power of the Dawn Society. Eleanor was very surprised by this and said that, however, it was too sudden. He said with a smile that this was an appropriate attitude for the hero of the Northern Front. She was about to object, but he called her by name and asked if she doubted his decisions. She apologized, and Tenelron called him and asked if that was enough. He agreed with a smile and thanked the archbishop. They came to a hall where there was a fountain with a cup on top. He laughed and said that it was wonderful. Then since they came here, he would show him something. He looked at it with a slightly surprised look and asked, is this golden cup a relic? He stood in the fountain, agreed, and said that this item had chosen him. He looked at it from the side and thought that this sacred relic, a demonic cup, an item capable of piecing together Barbatos from its fragments. He reached for the cup and took out a demonic horn. After that, he turned around and asked, it's not often you see something like this, right? With this relic, he can create demonic horns, the source of their power. It's impressive, isn't it? He looked at it and thought that this was the first time he saw how it was created. However, he knows about what kind of relic it actually is and what effect the horns have. If he uses it, then definitely. He called MC by name. He stopped thinking about it, agreed, and said that it was really impressive. So, with this horn, he will be able to use demonic power? Tenelron agreed, and he said that means he came to the right place. The horn will definitely be another step towards realizing his dream. He handed him the horn with a smile and said that since he says so, then it is now his. He took the horn with a confused and worried look and thought, did he just give it to him?